Hello there. Welcome to the podcast, StatGDP. That's the name of the podcast. We have our host, Fool Me Twice here, and co-host, Where's My Couch?
Where's my couch?
And we're going to be introducing this podcast, the types of topics we're going to be discussing, which should be widespread variety of them. And what's your reaction, co-host, to the name of the podcast? We are hosting today Stat GDP, and what is that? How does that relate to you or your way of thinking? What's the GDP? How are the stats on that? Are they good or are they whack? Are they fake news, fake numbers,
Fake
or do you
news.
trust them? Or what do you think of that?
I think everything is fake news. You want to talk about stats and GDP at the same time, I guess. I mean, gross to net. Okay, all right. Well, I mean, first thing that comes to mind for me is the rate cut that just happened yesterday. 106 out of 118 market analysts are wrong about 25-point cut, 50 basis point cut, right? And I'm pretty sure the Feds are not accounting for M2 money supply, right? And that's kind of the first order of business, right? So M2 is it's I don't know, it's separate from the Fed. It's separate from politics. It's just banks, right? How much do the banks
Mm-hmm.
hold, and our money supply is dwindling, and no financial organization is recognizing it. They just keep wanting to push the whole rhetoric of, hey, we're not in a recession. Look at the first they're talking about employment, right? Like unemployment numbers. It's like, well, okay, if it rises by 0.5% in a quarter, that's a recession, right? And that's happened quarter after quarter. So even by the new standards of what it means to be a recession, we're in a recession, right? And all these other nations out there are basically selling off the dollar, but we're not telling our own people about that. We just keep saying, hey, don't worry about the dollar, don't worry about its value. We're just going to keep printing. And you're going to get blinded by, all y'all be blinded by this larger number that's coming into your account for free, but you won't account for the fact that it's not even close to compensating for the inflation in the actual dollar, right? So everyone's purchasing power is lower. Um, why is this related to GDP? Well, I guess if no countries really want to value the USD as much as they used to with back when it's gold backed, oil backed, whatever. Like
Uh-huh.
now it's not really backed by anything, right? Now you got all these other countries
Right.
saying, well, I mean, we got better oil, we got gold, we're buying all the raw materials. Why do we need the USD, right? Why do we need the dollar? And so, uh, from a statistical point of view, I'm pretty sure we're entering like a period of probably recession and inflation at the same time, which is like the worst possible scenario, right?
Right. It
And
is the bad spiral, to put it mildly. And
right,
what you're saying, makes sense. And you're a statistically minded person and can analyze these kinds of things. And yet, what you're saying is that the stats are basically fake the way that we are presented with them, the way that we are told that we are not in recession because,
yeah,
well, 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth is going to be no longer the definition of a recession. We will claim that whatever we can grasp at, in this case, the jobs numbers, we're the good part, and that's what we're going to claim is growth until we found out lately, just this past month or so, that they added, what was it, over 800,000 jobs to it that they had to revise down after a year. So the
right,
jobs
right.
numbers are, as a matter of fact, not as good as they claimed they were, even though the definition of a recession, according to the press corps and White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, stated that the economy was doing well because the jobs numbers were good. And as we've just pointed out, on whatever metric you want to claim it's good, it's not in sync with what people are feeling for the most part
Right.
throughout the general public. Would you say so?
I would say so. I'd say a lot of people, a lot of Americans right now, they're suffering because they have lower buying power than they used to before, and they don't realize it, right? And most people don't stop to consider inflation on this level. They just think, oh, I got a bonus. I got 2% bonus, so I should be able to buy more than what I used to before. But it's not the case, right? So you got this national, it's just like this cloud over everyone. It's like everyone's kind of spiraling into misery and not really knowing why, right? And I'm in the boat of people who believe that since 2020 COVID, that effective consumer inflation is somewhere between 20 and 35%, right? I believe that since COVID 2020, if you didn't get a 30% pay raise, you actually have less buying power than you did in 2019.
Correct. And that is what is already reported according to the Fed's numbers on cumulative inflation, is that for the ones that they measure for food prices and things that they factor into that it is up somewhere from 25 to 30 plus percent, though of course some things are up 50 plus percent that people are used to purchasing a lot, like eggs or something. And you do see that a lot of the inflation, though, as you have also pointed out, is not measured in the inflation numbers, such as the things that people pay a lot more for, such as rent, housing, and in large part, people starting to get into the workforce and going to college, the price of a degree, basically, as we all know, for 20 plus years has gone up much faster than the rate of inflation, even maybe 5 times as fast in many cases.
I mean, I forget the exact number for the, in terms of like the CPI basket, right? It's something ridiculous like, everything, all the items in the basket make up like 12 to 15% of the average consumer's like total spending, because it doesn't account for mortgage, car loans, and student loans, right? It's like more than 90% of what people pay for, right? And if you count those in, you'll instantly realize this country's going down. Like, it is so not sustainable, right? Like, you cannot tell people that, inflation is, I don't know, what are they saying?
Well, on the recent quarterly
7%?
Annualized basis, I believe they're saying it's now only 3%. So getting down towards almost the natural rate over the last century or so of 1 to 3%. But annualized, the most recent statistic I've heard is somewhere from 2.9 to 3%.
Right. I don't think. See, I mean, I think they just want to lower the number to stop people from worrying and make people invest in American economy, right? I mean, ultimately that's what the Fed wants to do. It's like keep the American economy alive, keep Wall Street alive, which is basically the American economy, and they're in the pockets of Wall Street and for Jerome Powell and the Dems, right? So, I mean, it's in their best interest to make sure that before the election that they convince the American people that they succeeded, right? So I do believe that there's some, not collusion, or maybe, I guess that's what it is, right? I mean, there's something going on there. And I watched a bit of the Jerome Powell speaking yesterday.
Fed minutes.
About the Fed meeting, and you have all these reporters, they're asking questions, right? And I forget the names of the reporters, but I read the comments later, and they're like, okay, we recognize all these reporters. Look up this so and so's name. That was the woman who just asked him that question, and look at her page, and then her page is basically all just like praising the Fed, right? This, that, and so basically she asked a question that would be beneficial for the Fed to answer, which was no one posed any questions about the M2 money supply, by the way, right? It's like that is the most critical thing. And the fact that no one asked Jerome Powell about the M2, no one said M2 money supply during the entire meeting, which to me already is kind of crazy, right? Like,
why? Because the M2 is very high, or the Fed has a high balance sheet right now, or is that what you're getting at?
The money supply is dwindling, right? And there's like this small uptick, right, over the past like week or two in the M2 money supply, and all of a sudden the Fed's like, oh, cool, like we're doing good. But no, like if you know like any, like market analysts, you just look at any kind of like stock chart, yeah, you got to zoom out, right? Like small little uptick after like
Right.
months of complete crash doesn't mean you're going to recover. It's a small uptick. It means nothing, right? Like it's like they're somehow convincing the American people to like not consider how short term of a thing that they considered to make this call. It's like, well, we made this call, and you're gonna like it, right? And we got it, because we're legends. It's like, and like, yeah, we'll save the nation, right? It's like, yeah, no matter what, like we just print some money, and you guys will like that because you get more money, and you're not gonna realize that we're basically like devaluing the USD, and not just that, but the M2 money supply itself is also dwindling. So, like,
Well, yeah,
yeah,
right. And we're getting away with portraying the economy as good from a managerial class level because those are the ones whose incentive it is to make it seem like it's still good by keeping the earnings reports looking good within corporations to make sure that the GDP numbers grow at some so-called real rate of 3% or whatever it is that they want to claim is ahead of inflation for whatever it is they're claiming is inflating. But at the same time, most people realize on a purchasing power level, as you've stated, that they don't have as much. And even if you say that the economy is doing well, it's only measuring corporate success on paper, I think. And as we've discussed, it's not really being reflected in the purchasing power parity, which is probably tremendously down relative to what it felt like it was just 4 years ago. And I think everyone knows, and everyone is wondering, what's the explanation for that? And is the explanation skyrocketing out of control corporate greed on the basis of hiking prices within markets to price gouge the American public, of trying to get more bang for their buck on the grocery store aisles, of selling perishable foods for slightly more or much more? And, what are the earnings to price ratios? Like, what are the profit loss statements on grocery stores? Are they really all that high, or are they like 1% to 2%? I think they're not that high. And I think you can make the argument that the so-called price gouging era, as some have framed it, is more so proportionate to an increase in the money supply. I mean, in terms of not M2, like you're saying, is dwindling, but
right.
just the overall money printing that's been done over the last 4 years, in which we've seen, I believe, over half of the money that's ever printed now has been printed in the last 4 years, because it was like 40% of it within 2 years. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that has to, at some point, if you have any velocity of money whatsoever, at some point, get out to the consumer level of increasing prices by, you would expect, once you absorb it all, like upwards of 50%, really, and if not double,
Right.
depending on where it's distributed in terms of who's spending and who's investing and putting assets elsewhere or whatever. But you know what I mean? I think everyone's purchasing power parity is much worse, and everyone feels it, than it was 4 years ago. And that's like making people wonder, is it out of control corporate greed on some level? Maybe you could chalk it up to that, but at what level? And is it just within the managerial class, keeping it going
Right.
at the political and corporate level, just intertwined on that level? And can we ever get rid of all that greed through legislating that some of it come back to us? Or are we all trying to be jealous and be as greedy as the ones we claim are greedy? It's like, how do you solve that system, right? And is it just,
Right.
can we just chalk it up to corporate greed and say we need to stop the
Yes.
price gouging, and we need price controls, and we need more centralized authorities telling us what exactly should be the price of anything? And are they going to get it right? Or do the people believe that in general it's better and more price discovery environment and more organic to let the market decide what or however much of something there is relative to how much it's wanted? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, the power of socialism. Yeah. But but no, I mean, the one thing I was gonna say about that, what it reminded me of is the economy is not the market, and the market is not the economy, right? And a lot of people don't not only don't know that, they don't even think about it. They don't even think there could be a difference between the economy and the stock market, right? So it's like, well, the
Right.
economy is right now. The economy is everything that's built up to this moment, happening in this moment, and that's the way it is. The stock market is people are pricing things in like 2 quarters ahead, 2 quarters later. I don't know, right? It's like it is a leading indicator, lagging indicator. It's mostly a lagging, very laggy indicator, right? The stock market is I guess one example is the rate cuts, right? The rate cut, this won't be the last one in 12 months, right? They're probably going to do 2 or 3 more rate cuts, and
Mm-hmm.
and the stock market or lenders, the financial system is already pricing in, right, those rate cuts, or they're not, right? Because originally banks thought they're going to do a 25 basis point cut, and when it was 50, now all of a sudden these next 2 weeks they're going to have to drop the credit card interest rates down a bit more, another 0.25% or something, right? So in that sense, it's already a lagging indicator, the stock market right there. Right? It's like, well, the numbers are changing quarters after the economy has actually already been affected by whatever event it is this stock market stat is showing, right? Like the
Right.
economy has long been affected, and we need to focus on the actual economy, not the stock market, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, the stock market's doing well, Nvidia is going up, all these corporations are going, like, yeah, these like multi-billionaire, like, what I mean, like
Right.
these like super billionaires are making it. Like, that's old news, buddy. Like, yeah, it's the top 1%. It does make sense, and you're seeing it play out, and you're saying that, oh, because they're making it, I must also make it, and you're forgetting that the 1% is further diverging from the rest of us, right? Like, you just have to keep that in mind. It's like, well, you see Elon Musk making money, that just means you're making less money, right? We're at the point now where it's like, oh, millionaires and billionaires are okay. It's like in 2000, it's like, oh, millionaires and billionaires are doing well. Like, all these entrepreneurs are doing well. And if I do kind of think something similar, like the Bill Gates, like build a PC in my garage and sell it, maybe I'll be something, right? But now it's like the complete opposite.
Well,
In my
billionaires are
opinion,
doing even better than ever before, obviously,
they're
and the
doing
wealth gap
so
only
much.
exponentially increases
Right,
over time whenever you have any financial system, because those who are
right,
most privileged to be in a position to get the investors and to get the kickbacks or the legislation that kind of favors them or whatever gets them like the cash injection that they need is going to be
right.
done first before it's done en masse to the general public, right? So you would always expect more concentration of wealth in any financial system where you have fiat currency built into the system. So we can't really get rid of that. I don't think. It's like greed is always going to exist, and we're always going to hope we can get in on the system of greed that currently exists more than we're currently getting in on it, even though that kind of fans the whole flames of greed. So we're all kind of greedy on that level. But then it's like, how do you transcend it? How do you not be greedy, but just work on having a good economy and just having skills and just being good on a local level, I guess, is the only way to transcend it, because otherwise we're always going to want to be one of the elites in terms of getting in on the system that they already know is rigged in their favor, because we know it's rigged based on the market and the economy being separate from the stock market relative to the fact that, as you said, the elites are always
Yeah,
going to be getting even more of a step ahead of us and accelerating while we're coasting, or like their coasting is already relative to us accelerating past us. It's like the whole
yeah,
universal inflation expansion thing. Like their conveyor belt is already like zooming up past the speed of light relative to us chugging along and making
right,
paychecks on
right,
biweekly or however often basis that is more in line with the average person who makes either a wage or a mid-level salary relative to the business class who can just sit on earnings and royalties and all. And I think you look at the average rate of the stock market, the blue chip stocks, and it's always something from 6 to 8% ahead of inflation, I guess, in order for it to be a good investment. It's usually
mm,
touted as at least 6 to 8% returns long term to keep up ahead of natural GDP growth as well, which is more so like 3% or less in the growth environment we've had for a while, that we assume is the case, right? At least it's
right,
always got to be the case for us to claim everything's good on a national level, according to the feds. But like, because it's always going to be the fact that the stock market ends up being like playing slots with the elites, you might get a little bit better off, but is it really the thing we should all focus on if we want the best possible future for ourselves? That's kind of the question, and it plays into the fact that, as you've stated, the stats are kind of fake. So money is fake on some level, but we all depend on it at the same time. So yeah, what do you think of that?
Should we all be chasing the same thing that elites are chasing? Is what you're asking, right? I would
Yeah,
say no. I would say no because not because we shouldn't, but because it's almost impossible. I would say it's theoretically essentially impossible at this point because in order to make a change, sway the economy, sway the nation on something like that, even if for us 99% of common people, quote unquote, we would have to voice our opinion and have it be heard. And money talks, and we don't have money. So, you know, billionaires get heard every day. The Twitter, everything, they get blasted back and forth. Like, everyone, retweets this and that, right? Like from Elon Musk, this and that. Basically, we are, we common people are also propagating um, the elites to do, what they're doing because we're sort
correct.
of, you know what I mean? Yeah, we're kind of treating them as heroes, and we idolize them, right? And we idolize them, um, and a lot of the time it's not, it doesn't turn into action. It's just this dream of like, oh, when you see someone in a Lamborghini drive by, you everyone's looking at the car, not the driver, because the driver's thinking, oh, everyone's looking at me, I'm hot stuff, I'm in a Lambo, but everyone's looking at the car, not the driver, because they're imagining themselves driving that car, right, driving the Lambo,
Right.
and but what they're gonna do, they're gonna see it drive by and be like, oh, it'd be cool if I could have that. And they're gonna walk back into the pub, pay $50 for beers, get pissed drunk, and go home or something, right? And it's like, well, you save your $50 every few days or a week. At some point you could put a down payment 20 years down the road for a Lambo if you really wanted to, that kind of thing, right? But people don't think about that. They want their instant gratifications, and I feel like that's another reason why we're theoretically locked up, because there's enough of us that just want the instant gratification, right? They don't want to invest. Investing sounds scary to people. It's not just putting money that they could spend into an account. It's the thought of, well, like, um, I need a lot of money to get rich. It's like, no, just put any amount of money in the stock market. If it goes up 50%, it's 50% more than what you put in, right? Like, and then you see a dollar go to $1.50, then you think to yourself, if I put it 1,000, it would be 1,500 now, right? But that's not how people think, right? And
Right.
fortunately, we're all just 70. I think 70% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck or something like that. Like, it's just well above half, right? So, and it's not like they're unhappily doing it. I know a lot of people who are just like, totally like, wait, what's the big deal? I'm supporting myself. I'm eating every day. I'm sleeping. I see the doctor when I need to. Like, what? Why are you judging me for living paycheck to paycheck? And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. But you're stuck, right? You're stuck in this economical situation here, like forever until you change your mind. But you're thinking to yourself that you're going to move up, right? So that's the problem. It's like there's a disconnect between what the average person thinks about their future and what they're actually doing to achieve it, right? Meanwhile,
Right.
actual elites are putting money into the market, just manipulating it, making money off millions off of each move, and then taking it home, not saying anything about it. They're doing it right, quote unquote, whatever right means, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's right, quote unquote, according to what us 99% of people think is the right thing to do to make money, but we're not doing it, right? And that is one of the reasons why I got into this whole crypto situation, because I'm anti-elitist, but
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I'm like, well, what if this is one way to make sure, or and what if this is one way to just take a scratch, take a nick out of this huge pool of money going to the 1%? What if, right? What
Right.
if this is one way that we can dismantle, right? Like you're saying, how do we as common people kind of dismantle this system, right? That's basically what we're getting at. And I think maybe crypto, but I don't know if I super believe that. But out of all the new technologies and assets that come out in the last 10, 20 years, it's seemingly the most promising when going that direction. It's like, what else can I think of that's going to disturb the system on that level? right? When not only do elites have power, but we as people are giving them power by just repeating what they're saying on social media and just wanting to be like them. You know what I mean? Like all
Yeah.
press is good press, right? Even bad press is good press. It doesn't matter. You're bringing up Elon Musk. His name's referenceable on like a billion references per hour or something. I don't know, right? It's like on Google, right? It's like we're propagating it ourselves and we're complaining about it at the same time, and that's a huge problem in my opinion. That's why I feel like logistically we kind of screwed ourselves over already.
Well, like you're saying, with the whole idolization of the so-called elites in terms of whoever we perceive to be the elites with the Lamborghinis, is we're thinking in terms of what is owed to us because we don't have it, so we are jealous, we want it, and we are perceiving them as some guy or gal or whoever else as not being any better than us because, oh, they have an unearned amount of wealth that just generates itself, and that's unfair. So if they have it, well, shouldn't I also be entitled to it? I should also have that unfairly unearned sense of wealth accumulation for me, which means playing the lottery, playing the gambling, yes, the stock market is a gamble in itself, but trying to play the slots of the elites, I guess, of investing. And we also want that get rich quick scam basic ideology, as opposed to the whole get rich slowly invest and accumulate and gain skills that you reliably know is going to increase your productivity or amount of wealth accumulation over time. And what even is that? Because I think fewer and fewer people, as we have this really weird like expose of the managerial class trying to blast off into infinity, basically, in terms of creating as large a class or structure of people who can exist within that structure or hierarchy as possible, who instruct or advise or lead the rest of the workers to be as far removed and as many tiers of chains of command removed from the actual production process of whatever is actually goods and services that exist, that actually get made, and services that are actually done and all. And the whole disconnect there of the more chains of disconnect you have and larger the managerial class gets, the less and less the managerial class actually understands what anything is or is of value for, and what is actual productivity is, I guess, because it's harder and farther removed when you think of it more from a theoretical construct of here's exactly the policies of how everything should be done. And then it kind of is a disconnect because once you're in the managerial class, you want to put your own foot on the pedal or whatever and move the needle a little bit with your pet projects of saying, here's my argument that I can present as bullet points in this meeting to why I change things for the better and why I deserve a raise within this corporate structure of moving up the corporate ladder, or however much we do it, or however much we're involved in that, however much we consider ourselves within managerial class, which you may or may not consider yourself part of. However, a lot of people would look at you still and say, okay, you're one of the elites, you're part of the managerial class, because it's all this one big hierarchy of perception and how people are perceived, and there's always someone above you and there's always someone below you. So at any given point, anyone could look at you who's on the street or whatever, like sleeping on the sidewalk, and just look up at anyone who is still within the system of finance and has any job, even if they are living a paycheck to paycheck, and they might look at you or anyone else who is or is not living paycheck to paycheck, but at least is in the system, in the so-called prescribed polite society way to be within it, and might still say you're one of the elites. So how do we break through or break free from that hierarchical notion of us being on some scale where we see people as above or below us? Like, do we have the societal wherewithal and like mentality we need and cohesiveness to say, nah, let's scrap this. We're all basically still equal to however much we are valuable within ourselves, which is we all value ourselves, so we're all equal basically on that level. And it's like, is that even achievable? Or like, what are your thoughts?
I would say religion, race, like, the racism and sorry, this thing you're just talking about, it's all manufactured. It's all weaponized, right? Like, it's just sorry, that term you're using just now. I was trying to think about things that were similar, and I forgot the term you were using.
Yeah. Well, that's
But
okay. Also,
basically,
basically forgot.
similar,
But
similar, similar, yeah, similar things would be like religion and racism, right? It's like it's all. Oh, I guess what I'm trying to say, it's like playing off of natural human instincts and trying to make us blame ourselves for the hierarchy situation, right?
yeah,
It's like the hierarchical the tendency to separate other humans into a hierarchical fashion is built into our genetics. That's my opinion. Our
right.
tendency to be racist or whatever, to categorize people based on color or the size, whatever it is so deeply rooted into us. But what po- politics and economy has done is weaponize these innate tendencies that humans have, right? So in the workplace, it's like, yeah, we naturally want to feel out how much higher or lower the person next to us is. That's basically a survival instinct, right? Once you
Right.
realize, oh, they're just lower than me, then you don't have to worry about them. But if you
Yeah. Who
realize
should I
that
mess
they're
with
higher
or
than,
not?
yeah, right. Yeah, who can I mess with and who do I have to be afraid that will mess with me? Right? It's literally the black and white. It's literally, it's like, are you a leader or are you a follower? But then no, that's always the question. But then it depends on who you're talking to and who they're referencing, right? So it's like, oh, that guy's higher than me, so I'm gonna be a follower in front of them. But oh, these peons below me, I'm a leader of them because they know less than me, or I think I know more than them, or whatever it is, right?
Right.
So again, it goes back to how do you stop people from doing that? I don't think you can. I mean,
No.
basically, it's like telling people to stop categorizing people based on skin tone or height, right? It's like it's impossible. You go in a room, there's somebody who's 6'5" and there's somebody 5'5". Your brain automatically goes like, holy crap, there's a giant in here and there's somebody who's slightly shorter than me in here, right? It's not like, oh, here's two like just the two random humans. Maybe some like people who are like well into the spectrum, like they don't ever that thought never crosses their mind, but that's not the average person, right? So the average person still sees a discrepancy, and their brain picks up on it and evaluates it on a level that maybe consciously don't even realize, right? Like for most people. So, man, how do you stop? I mean, you can't. You basically have to
You
revert
cannot
to
stop it.
socialism. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
You
what you're
basically have to
saying
revert to
is that we keep on repeating history, and we always will look up to
right,
someone who will be the Leviathan or the leader who we
right,
idolize. And
the
because
alpha
we
or
do
whatever.
not want to put our own
Right,
selves in as much danger as we want him or her, or usually him, to put himself into. Because, like you're saying, the alpha or whatever, we need to be led. And that's unfortunately the guarantee within human nature on this clade of evolution, apparently at this point, that we have to revolutionize at some point. There's always a revolution or a takeover and a coup, and things become tyrannical. This has to happen, basically, in
right,
my thinking, unfortunately, according to human nature, because any of these idolization processes always end up being inorganic enough to make us think that we cannot survive without the leader or the dear leader or whoever, because there are those of us, and myself included, who have wondered about the stability of the United States relative to these assassination attempts, and would it really destabilize everything on what level exactly if we saw one of these things go through as successful, you know what I mean? And hopefully we would be a decentralized, like individually endorsing, like self authoring person type culture enough that we would not all freak out and immediately descend into chaos on like the worst levels. But we haven't seen that happen recently, I guess, in the especially post 2020 era, which seems like a really crucial era to make the distinction of that we're living in the post 2020 era. And
yeah,
I don't know how much that would destabilize us or not, but we have a lot of idolization, of certain public figures, and I'm definitely not immune to it. I definitely see it and basically celebrate it on a lot of levels, but I also think we have to endorse ourselves, and we all have to make America great again together, ourselves, as individuals, and no political candidate can come in and completely save us completely. You know what I mean? We can't hoist
yeah,
the
yeah.
entire burden on one person because they're going to fall at some point. They're going to die, in the next couple of decades or however long it takes for whoever's in charge at the political level to croak, and we're going to have to hold it together and move forward no matter what, right?
Right, right. And yeah, no, totally. I guess this is kind of a follow-up comment to something you were saying earlier, but I got reminded of again about, these Gen Z bros on the social media, right? It's like everybody wants to be seen as a leader, seen as the alpha, but no one wants the accountability, right? And it comes down to accountability. It's like really in this society, the true alphas are okay being accountable for everything. And that is a rare trait. Like, the organic tendency to take accountability for everything that happens around said person, that is a rare trait, in my opinion. Most people don't want that
Right.
accountability, but everybody wants to be seen as the guy who takes accountability, right? But then the moment strikes, right? Yeah, I'm sure you've seen it at the workplace. It's like managers, hot shots, they say this, say that, and the moment they get put on the spot, oh no, sorry, I was joking, guys. Like, take it easy. No, take Friday off if you have to, and then, you know what I mean? And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so you had all these crazy ideas acting like you're alpha, and as soon as your manager comes in and asks you why are you making everyone stay on the weekend, it's like, oh no, I'm just kidding, right? Like, okay, but if you're truly an alpha, you would still stick to your guns and be like, well, okay, no, like I need them here because this project needs to be done on Monday, and this time this month I'll pay this person 1.5x overtime. I don't care, like instead of just being like, oh yeah, you're right. I don't really want to like deal with that either because I don't want to come in on the weekend, right? So okay, yeah, everyone just take Friday off too, right? And it's like, oh man, that's to me like if I were to do that, I'd feel like pretty miserable, man. I'd be like, okay, like everyone basically knows I'm fake, right? Everyone
Right.
knows I'm in the pockets of I sold out basically, right? Like I don't have my own thoughts anymore. I don't have my own opinions. It's like I will sell. I suppress them for the pay for the I don't know this 8 to 5 hourly wage thing, right? It's like oh, and I guess I'm the kind of person at this point in my life where I just can't respect that. Like I see it happen and I'm like, oh, like, don't talk to me anymore. Like the things you say don't mean anything anymore. But then I realized that enough people around me are like that now that I'm just
Yeah.
straight up becoming antisocial. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh man, do I need to start accepting people like this? Like to like not feel antisocial? And I'm like, no, no, I'm still sticking to my guns, right? I'm still saying these crazy antisocial people, in my opinion, are just not worth my time. Still, like I'd rather be antisocial at home, not meeting these people, than going out trying to meet these people. And that's where I'm at. So, am I one of the degenerates of society? Yes, arguably, right? But who isn't, right? Who isn't a victim of this freaking system, right?
Right. One of the abilities that you have to have when you're accountable is the humility to try something and to have it go wrong. And like you're saying, if you're accountable, then it is your mistake, and to admit that you made a mistake. And that is the
Right.
progress that we get out of experimenting to try something we don't know is going to work or not. And most of the time, like you're saying, not as many of us want the accountability as would need to want the accountability, I believe, if we're going to actually be accountable enough to create a better situation for everyone. Because right now we kind of still want within the system the ability to be rocketed upwards within the hierarchy, with the whole hierarchical distinctions of looking up to the elites as if they are good on a level that we wish we were owed the goods from, but don't currently. So I don't know what I'm saying here really, but mostly just the whole elitist mentality that we want to have part in by being part of the managerial class, selling out and being fake on that level. But at what point does everything just need a reset and an ice break, and just the fact that we can always wonder if we're even correct about what we think is the case, and it's kind of rare to have the kinds of discussions where you're not talking past each other as far as pumping your own just hobbies and likes and ideologies and seeing who else pings in the same direction and resonates completely with that or disagrees and makes fun of it or whatever. And it seems difficult to have the kind of civil discourse dialogues where both parties are coming into a conversation and saying, we don't know what the full-on case is, but we're equals in the ability to like observe life and discuss things so we can talk it out and figure out what's going on and bring multiple perspectives and see how many of the infinite number of perspectives we have that we can collect together and see what's like more accurate than what we currently know? Or is there any better way to do that? Or is there any way to reconcile differences? Because it seems like we have so many different ideological camps that only kind of want to portray the other side as evil and bad and wrong. And we kind of have this simplistic entitlement mentality these days where we want to be told we're correct about stuff. And here are all the reasons why we're already correct, and you don't have to question or think about the other side because they're evil. You know what I mean? It's pretty polarizing, and it's unfortunate, and there are big differences in ideologies these days, for sure, but I think it's hard to have those kinds of conversations as often these days, as much as we maybe need it, but maybe that's the big irony and the reason we're in this situation in the first place, you know?
I think the irony, for me, there's a big picture irony where okay, so all the people chasing after the same game as elites, it's like the big picture irony for me is that when I go to third world countries like I've been to Malaysia, not really third world at that point, but just like out in the villages in China, it's like these people are so happy. They spend every day with their families. They're just chilling. They're laughing. They're simple. You can say ignorance is bliss, but dude, they're living it, right? And they're not worried about who's rich, who's poor, what the government's really doing, unless they're taking their land or whatever, right? But it's like, only the real day-to-day things matter to them, which is what should matter. It's not what this elite's doing or that elite or the town politicians are doing. No, it's just what do I need to do to put food on my table, to have fun with my family, have a good time, have a good organic interaction with my neighbors and all those things, right? And that's what we as Americans need. We lost sight of that. We've gone so far down this rabbit hole of wanting to be rich, wanting to be like the elites, that we forgot that we don't actually deserve that. We don't need it. We don't deserve it. We probably don't even want it once we have it. In fact, most people who go from rags to riches would tell you it's not worth it, actually, right? It's like more money, more problems, right? It's a true thing, right? Like, I'm not rich,
right,
but as soon as I started making money, more money, more problems, dude. Like, you think you want more, and you might overextend a little bit, and then you end up going under, which is not a situation you would have been in before you started making money.
Right. As soon as you are comfortably well off enough to where you feel you can support most of your needs, basic needs and things within the whole system and financial structure and all, it becomes hard to see why making more money would add guaranteed levels of happiness, because as we all know, at that point, money would be fake if we are expecting it to solve our problems at that point. So, like, how real really is it? And how many people get to be one of the elites or deserve to be one of the elites? You're saying basically nobody, because, I guess we're all equal in some level organically as organisms in the ecological sense. But at the same time, we do need leadership somehow. And part of that is ideological, spiritual, intellectual, whatever you want to call contributive, just journalistic leadership. Somebody has to communicate on some level to say how it is with each other. And we're so interconnected globally and news-wise at this point that a lot of people pay a lot of attention to, example, U.S. politics, even if they're in Australia or something. And maybe some people in small villages have the luxury of not caring about it or what the elites are doing, how are they affecting us negatively or whatever. But we have such an infrastructure built in terms of the whole public education system and all of our institutions, and whether it's universities doing scientific research or whatever it is, we have so much built in intellectual leadership, quote unquote, that steers how we think of news stories and how we think of what we need technologically, medically, and all with all these publications, that the question then is, are there too many of these elites? And if so, why would we deserve to be part of them? Or how would we decide that it is our responsibility to pay attention to what the elites are doing, and at the same time say we shouldn't be caring what the elites are doing? That is only for a small portion of us elites, quote unquote, or less elites, just middlemen somewhere along the line of the elites who have to pay attention somewhat enough to tell everyone else on a delegation type level what's going on. And is there any realistic good that comes out of that. And, somebody's got to be calling things out, calling the shots as they are coming in the way they see it. So I guess it's just how much communication we want to have with each other on any level that is organic enough that it cuts through the whole corporate structure and the bread and circuses of us just going through and using technology only for consumption-based entertainment and not for anything that's real, that makes us satisfied. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, it's like, oh, the elite guy can have it. Why can't I? It's basically just like a basic, like, childish mindset. I feel like it's just a very childish mindset that gets propagated into adulthood, and you layer all the, the adult terminologies on top of this, but it really it's I mean people, not you. Like, the average American will layer all these like buzzwords that they learn throughout their adult life on top of this basic feeling of, oh, they have it, why can't I have it? Right? It's like, but do you even think you need it? Like, and once you get it, do you have an action plan that you can carry out where you use this money, wealth, whatever it is, to like attain something that actually makes you happy, or do you just like want a bigger number? Right? For most people, it's the latter. Right? For me, I try to focus on the former, which is, money is basically just a means of getting some organic happiness, because in this structured society, quote unquote, you just somehow can't really easily get it because it's not a third world society. It's a first world, so everyone's basically got to like do this fake job thing 8 to 5 to like live like a normal, like, the third world country person would, if like not even as good. Basically, I would say our quality of life is like lower than the average quality of life of somebody just living in like Vietnam or something, like just fishing every day, getting fresh food every day,
Right.
like the best water.
Yeah, some places
Like,
won't even take our
yeah.
food if we try to
Dude,
export it.
I know. It's we're just so processed, right? I mean, like, most European nations are rejecting like all meats coming from America, like the USD, DM meats or whatever. Like, it's just
Right.
like, yeah,
USDA is not good enough for them, apparently.
USDA, right? USDA, sorry. Yeah. USDA standards are bullcrap, apparently. Like, just I didn't look into the specifics, but like, I guess the thresholds for various contaminants is like, I guess above what other countries deem as toxic or harmful for the average human body, right? But then Americans would be like, oh, well, Americans are different. We're built different. It's like, no, we're not. We're all the same humans with like
Yeah, well,
similar.
USDA, that's interesting. I hear they are at the beef production areas daily for inspection, and that sounds like a very common
So it's
frequency
kind of,
for
I
it
don't
to
know.
be
It's
still
a rabbit.
not on.
It's a
Yeah,
rabbit
it's a rabbit hole because that's corporate
because
compliance getting in
who runs
touch with
USDA? Right.
USDA. Yeah,
Right. It's the same. If you go up the ladder, not the corporate, the go up the business ladder, it's the same group of people, right? Like, managing
right.
everything,
The managerial
overseeing
class that's helping
everything.
the Congress write the bills or maybe writing it for them because they don't want to be writing 1,000 pages down. They want to go get some funds for their next campaign, obviously.
Right. The way I see it is the same way tow yards are in cahoots with like police, right? It's like, well, the police, like, they tow a car because it's been parked wrong or something, and they tow it to a tow yard that they're in cahoots with. They will leave it at the tow yard for like 3 days, where it's already like acquired like $700 a day worth of like, storage fees, right? And then they tell the owner, oh, we found your car. But it's been sitting at the lot for 4 days, and you owe 4 times 700, and you have to pay like 2,800 to get it out. So it's a straight up con, right? So I mean, that's what it feels like to me. I mean, that's what you're describing to me. But in terms of like, the car thing, right? It's just like, well, the USDA thing is basically, well, let's make some regulations to like basically just screw everyone over while we're making money. Like, that's all. Like, that's all I can really sense from that. So I don't know. I'm pretty sure like someone like Bill Gates funded like not
Right.
USDA, but like dude, like I mean, all
He's
right,
one of the
like
biggest farm owners, I think.
right. So I'm like, all right, like if there's anything you should know about Bill Gates, you do not invest in what he's investing in. Like, it's usually just purely for self-interest, right? Okay, so this guy's buying farms. Okay, like, okay, so like What does he expect? So he basically thinks that some point maybe that either the likely other nations that we get food supply from is going to like devalue the U.S. dollar, so we're not going to have buying power to get goods
Imports,
from other countries,
right?
imports, right? Like, and so we have to grow our own food, and so this guy's trying to jump on that boat, right? He's trying to jump on that ship early. He's figured I got all these billions of dollars. I can buy up these farmlands early before the prices go up when everyone realizes that we can only source domestically, right? And like it's just like a personal gain thing. Like he's not actually going to be like, oh, like I'm gonna make sure Americans eat well, like anything like that. It's like no, this is like very lucrative
No,
for him, and that's it,
right?
right? Like he's not. There's no plan for like I'm gonna make sure I add these non-toxic grow chemicals into the soil. I'll make sure it's all organic. No, nothing like that. It's just like the most systematic, economical approach to like making food, right? Growing food. Like, and there's no, oh man, there's like no organic aspect to it whatsoever in terms of like what it does for people, right? So I don't know how I feel about domestic source food, like, and it's like now I can see it. Like if I get even Alaskan salmon is like really, it's still within U.S. technically, right? But they have to ship it the same way they would ship like a Canadian shipment or like
Uh-huh.
a Mexican shipment, right? It's the same distance basically,
Yeah.
right? And so like Alaskan salmon's gone up 50% at Costco since COVID, right? But like
Mm-hmm.
it's more than you know, like a domestically grown apple, for example, which probably went up about the same as like other inflation, like 20 or 30% or whatever. But like Alaskan salmon, even though it's sourced from the same country, is like really ridiculously expensive. And then Norwegian salmon is probably like 3 times more expensive now than it was before,
Yeah. Well, the energy
which is
prices are
which
up
is
also, so shipping is going to cost a little more from that. It's all
well,
the whole shebang.
that's true, but nothing has like increased the cost of our imports more than the fact that our USD is being devalued against all other currencies, right? Maybe except for like the yen or something.
Right. Well, fiat currencies in general are doing poorly at this point, I would say. And the thing is about the U.S. is luckily we have a good enough geography to be theoretically food self-sufficient. We overproduce food, so we may not be able to export as much if people don't like our food standards or whatever's in them. But at least theoretically, we could be energy self-sufficient and food self-sufficient. So there is an
Yeah,
ability on this continent to still have a nation, even if its money supply changes relative to whether it's the global reserve currency or the petrodollar getting removed or whatnot.
I mean, I believe it, right? It's like, you know, if you have the material resources to maintain, a good quality of life for all your people, then arguably, even on paper, nothing else matters, right? It doesn't matter how your economy is doing, how politics are. If everyone's eating well, living well on like, organic, human aspect point of view, then like technically a government has succeeded right there, right? Like it doesn't have to promise everyone being happy or like getting along with one another. It's like that's all on you. Like we're just gonna make sure that you have like necessities for life, and then everything else is on you. And then if you cause trouble or kill people, then I guess we'll like do something about that. But like aside from that, you do you or whatever, right? Like I guess laissez faire or whatever. I guess we need a renaissance, but maybe that's what the great American Renaissance of the 21st century is what we need. Like,
Right. That is exactly what we need, right? We need an American
right,
Renaissance. We need
right,
a call and we need to harken back to the days of old, basically.
yeah,
And
right.
so when
Well,
the
minus slavery,
Democrat
minus,
candidate per
minus slavery,
president says, we ain't going back, or, we are not going back,
right,
well, we kind of have to go back because everyone kind of knows things were better in the past on some level. And a lot of people will bring up slavery, but, you know, that is an unfortunate part of the past. And we have almost enslaved our own mindsets to the point of accepting taxation rates that may be as high, if not higher, or definitely more types of taxes, which accumulate to fleece us of more of our wealth on the books and all, and reported income and whatnot, than what may have been the case to trigger an American Revolution in the 1700s, perhaps. Wasn't that over the tea tax? And that sparked a big outrage. And I think we have levels of taxation today and on things that we didn't even have it on before, like income itself, or the possibility of the whole unrealized capital gains tax being levied as well, that I think would really lower the level of business and consumer confidence combined, and the business optimism as far as wanting to start new businesses or do other forms of investment, whether it's moving your assets around or worrying about where your real-time unrealized gains are looking as far as your tax liabilities on the coming year. And I think we could get out of the loop of what we need at this point in terms of an American Renaissance if we try hard enough. The thing is, it's very hard because we all have to be organic about it and show the level of like motivation that we can have towards skilling up in ourselves, becoming more independent from whatever we want to be independent of, the financial system or whatnot, getting the ability to have our own gardens and have a real estate, and investing in ourselves on that level in a way that is more sustainable and more immune to the outside forces of the grid getting shut down and whatnot. But that now is me trailing off into the whole MO and MRE's mindset of getting ready for the crash or the big collapse or something. And like that's always a possibility, but the elites are always going to want to bake that possibility into their investments as well. So you kind of see that a bit with respect to the Bill Gates and all his real estate investments. So it sounds like a big collapse is possible, but it will be much easier to be less worried about the more skilled more of us are, and the more we realize that trying to go up the managerial class chain and get away with it is kind of going to end up spelling doom to everyone in a sort of tragedy of the commons of everyone thinking they're looking out for their own individual best interest, but screwing over all of society at the same time. You know what I mean?
Right. No, I agree. And I'll have to read my French history again later, but I feel like before the Renaissance, I mean, what leads up to the Renaissance? It's like a massive social, political, like turmoil, like a civil war kind of thing, or just looting and pillaging your neighbors. You know what I mean? Like we have to go through that to get a Renaissance. It's not just going to be going from this social media age. Somehow magically everyone flips a switch and says, oh, I believe we should have a Renaissance. No, it's literally like the system has to make it like more than half of the American citizens feel so crazy about their situation that they have to lash out against like a neighbor or somebody on the, because it's getting really close to that point where people's boil is coming to this threshold where, you know, any small little like instigation here and there, someone would be like, "Oh, you're dead. I'm fucking kill you," like that kind of thing, right? Like, I feel it's coming.
That is already increasing because you hear about more events that have to do with road incidents and people getting mad and getting out and, you know, shooting at each other based off of a traffic incident.
Yeah.
And that apparently is happening more often now. And I think it's more our case of post-2020 dehumanization of everything around us and kind of the level of narcissism that we kind of are within the framework of being influenced by. And I don't know, it's a weird kind of almost boiling over type of tensions to do with nothing like relevant though at the same time, because it's like just taking everything out on whoever you didn't like the driving of or whatever, you know. It's like one of those symptoms of something almost boiling over, like you're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. It's cool that you brought up driving, because it's only the driving situations, like the road situations, are the first thing that makes me think that we're headed that direction, right? Because it's like the road situations, like you're not looking at people's faces; they're all just cars, right? You're not really thinking about the fact that there's a human in there, so you're just kind of like reacting kind of inorganically. It's like, oh, F this guy, let me run him over, that kind of thing. You wouldn't say that if
Yeah.
that was just a person walking on the road, right? So there's
Yeah.
this sort
Or
of
with a shopping
disconnect.
cart and just nudging
Right,
out of
right,
the
right,
aisle.
right. There's like, well, exactly. Yeah, there's a disconnect there, right? If you're in a car and you know your victim is in a car as well. And it's something I wanted to mention. This happened last week, dude. Okay, so I don't know what built up to it, right? So like this is on the main expressway. This is like 1:30, like right after lunch. I forget what day of the week it was, but it was super busy. Okay, so this like a 3 or 4 lane expressway, and the two right lanes were getting completely held up, like just this absolutely gridlocked. And I didn't know why. I thought people were trying to make a right turn somewhere. But then I was on the left lane, so I drove past this
Mm-hmm.
huge line of cars that are honking and like, really anxious, like, just trying to get somewhere. Like you can tell by the people sitting in the car, like the WTF's going on up there, like they're super anxious, right? And then I
Right.
get all the way to the front, and I see two cars parked there, and the people are talking to each other. I'm like, oh, they got in an accident or something. And then I got up and I'm like,
Oh.
no, the cars aren't even touching. They're just arguing. They're just
Oh.
literally fighting, and like they stopped their cars in the middle of the expressway, blocking 2 lanes just to yell at each other, right? And then okay, so like so they're pretty close to the red light. They're like at the intersection. So
Mm-hmm.
light turns red as I get up there. So I stop, and then I'm in the furthest left lane, right? So another car shows up to my right. So a third car lines up with, the other two cars that are like already arguing, right? And this guy must have like shot out of, the gridlock lane just to like, get ahead, right? You could tell he was
Mm-hmm.
already fed up. Like so he like rolls down his window. This is the third car. He looks over at these other two who are arguing, which I'm sure he doesn't know who they are, right? They're strangers to him, and he starts yelling at them like, "What the like? You guys are holding up, dude, like." I
Right.
thought the words "I'm going to kill you" was going to come. He's like, "I'm gonna like, you guys
Right.
better move. Like, you better get going. You're blocking traffic." Like he was like in the middle of like his insanity, censoring himself from
Uh-huh.
saying I'm gonna effing kill you,
Yeah.
right? And this is like he doesn't even know why they stopped. He just sees two people arguing, gets really like pissed off about the fact that he had to wait behind two people arguing, and then he himself stops in the third lane to argue with them, right? And I'm like, oh my god, this society is going down. Like all, there was a moment where I'm like, okay, is a fourth car gonna show up? Is a fifth car gonna show up? Like, okay, what is the threshold, right? Before everybody on this intersection between this light and that light get out of the car and start a brawl. Like, I felt like we were on the cusp at that moment. I was like, okay, all it takes is one more car. If I roll down my window, I'd be the fourth car. If I yelled across at the guy who's yelling at the other two guys, I'm pretty sure at that point everyone behind us would start to get out of their cars, right? And at that moment, it's like, what is this? This is a riot, right?
Yeah.
And this is what happens before a Renaissance. Is the whole everybody doesn't know why, but they're so fed up and they can't direct their anxiety in the right areas. They just blow up. They
Yeah.
boil
They just
over at
lash
the
out to the
same time.
nearest
Yeah,
convenient place
yeah,
to express that
right,
they're
right,
experiencing a
right,
inconvenience on themselves that they're willing
right,
to
right,
stand up for, apparently, and care so
right,
much about, because it's all about looking like one of the elites, which means having the justifiable level of anger towards whatever you think you're entitled to that you're not getting, to try and incrementally look like you're the higher status person by being one of the elites, which means we're all competing for that. And because it's a big scheme and a scam, we're like pitted against each other for the purpose of being part of this hierarchy of trying to be one of the
right,
elites, if you're thinking on those terms. So it just could easily spiral out of control to where there's no control over whether that turns into a brawl or a riot or whatever. And once it's organically turned into a riot, then nobody knows how it started or why it started or what anyone's writing over. But everyone would know at that point that, well, everyone is angry, so apparently there is a lot to be angry about. And a lot of people, once enough other people are on that threshold of like, yeah, we also agree that there's a lot to be angry about, then it might as well just spiral out of control and have everybody rioting and destroying stuff. And you don't know how fast that's going to escalate to the majority of things being destroyed or all planned lines of, supply chain integrity fall through, and all of a sudden everything is looted, the stores are empty, the truck drivers don't want to deliver anymore, it's all like chaos, and then everyone runs for the hills or stays and fights and, or flies away or something. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the story that could escalate that you're describing is possible there, right?
Right. And it has to start. Basically, it just starts from one intersection down to like a whole street to a city to the news finding out, then everyone going like, wait, that city did that, like we should go out and start a brawl, like let's go out and start a brawl, like start a riot, and then it picks up. It's like this infectious thing, right? And if they could do it in France in like the 1700s, 1800s, whatever, when there was no internet or like any sort of social media, if they could all get together and do that, then I don't see why we couldn't now. But at the same time, social media is that powerful. It's like we're that connected and we're also still that jaded. You know what I mean? Like, it's that powerful of a freaking beast. And I don't think I've said this yet, but the idea of elitism itself is weaponized, right? It's like,
right.
The government just wants you to think, oh, yeah, you could be like that. Just work hard. Everyone can get rich, right? And it's like, no, that's not true. And not everyone should want to get rich, because that's not what people organically want. They just want what they need to make them happy. And anyone who has the will find a means of getting what they want, right? In my opinion, right? You don't have to overpay. You don't have to overwork. You don't have to sell yourself out for what you want in life, right? The moment you do that, you lose sight of everything, in my opinion. And elitism has made the average American lose sight of possibly every goal like they've had in life, right? It's like, oh, I don't need to set the goal for myself. I can just watch this guy do it and feel some sort of like, like this bare minimum, like satisfaction, contentment towards his situation or her situation, and then like somehow like project it onto myself. It's the same thing as watching the guy in the Lambo. You're not looking at the dude. You're thinking, oh, I wish I was that guy in that Lambo. But then what are you doing to be the guy in the Lambo? Are you going to steal a Lambo? Are you going to make the money to get there? You going to steal money to get a Lambo? Like, what is your action plan, right? Then people freeze up. Then they're like, oh, no, I just wanted to, like, fall out of a tree or something. Like, it's like, no. Are you kidding? We're so disillusioned. Like,
or they will watch his programs on stock pickings and which penny stocks to invest in, so that getting on his email list will get them the riches they deserve. Because many people on any class level or whatever, to me, I kind of reject the whole hierarchical structure of anything, because you can perceive it however which way you want, inverted or whatever. It's arbitrary, right? Which ones you choose to focus on and perceive and obsess over, and which you are like, well, that doesn't really matter. Why are we going crazy over that? But I totally forgot my place there and was thinking about hierarchies or elitism or something. But what were you talking about?
Well, I was just saying elitism is weaponized, essentially, right? I mean, it's convinced everybody that it is what they want, but it's not what most people want. It's not even what most people need, right? We're all just getting jaded.
Right, because we want more bang for our buck, which means we're totally focused on money if we focus on that, which means getting a better deal on the way that is already marketed at us as far as how to cost average down and do everything according to the system's recommendation on how to get more efficient with money and all, and its recommendations within its system, versus lowering costs on an organic level, which means just developing more skills, socially, technically, or otherwise, that will bring down the cost of everything by increasing the amount of actual sharing on a non-transactional based level, because that obviously makes things a lot freer, quote unquote, than buying it, because then it's part of the system and it's going to be taxed. Anything that is on record always ends up being less efficient in a way, even though the whole lean manufacturing and the way we advertise everything as being getting more efficient, and we need to study it and corporatize it and analyze it on the efficiency level, which can help a bit, but it usually ends up developing all these little pet projects, I think, of people still within their whole elitist mindset trying to ride up the elitism ladder or hierarchy within the corporation to make themselves seem the most distinguished and to make sure others are picking up the slack, basically, for what they don't want to do anymore, and wanting to be an elite, therefore, depends on what you want to be elite within, because anyone is an elite on whatever level they think is necessary enough to make it possible for them to survive on, because whatever you survive on, you are a routine creature and organism with all these cycles that's dependent on the moon and the sun and all. And at the end of the day, if we're surviving for decades, then we are one of the elites within nature that has survived for decades, I guess. So that is a basic level of what being one of the elites would be considered, because you're the elites within the fraction of the organisms that survived as long as you did, I guess. But I'm just trailing off here, but
well,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a definition of it could be elite. I mean, yeah, okay, like within species versus like between species, right? It's like okay, like extra species, I guess, interspecies.
Elitism within the
elitism, right?
within the ecosystem. And that's also relative, because it's like some organisms look at a different species, they don't really care. It's like whatever that species is doing, it's not bothering me, so I don't really care about or perceive its hierarchy. But this peacock or whatever is either an attractive mate or not an attractive mate, so I'm going to rank them within that hierarchy of how much I want to reproduce with that peacock or whatever. But we don't care about the peacock hierarchy, so we can't tell as much on their level what an attractive peacock is, because they're just peacocks to us, right? But anyway, we can analyze it on some level and make an analogy to humanity or our own hierarchies that we have, but they all end up being closed systems, basically, I guess, if that makes sense.
You know what? All these other species that don't necessarily, at least to our knowledge, have any sort of monetary system or anything like that, they'll look at us, they'll look at what we consider as elites within the human race and be like, oh no, they're all like pudgy, fat. That guy hasn't worked out. Like, but what about like this like hard worker over here, like shoveling stuff all day? That guy's an elite because he's fit. Like that's how animals would look at us, right?
Yeah, he's one of the one who's in action, who's like doing at least his fair share of the work, basically, and is a fully functioning elite, like athletic human being, basically, which animals perceive athleticism obviously as pretty high up in their hierarchies, it seems like a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's fit. I mean, just fitness, right? Just overall fitness. It's just like such an organic thing. It's like, oh, that thing looks fit. I don't want to mess with that. Or like that thing looks fat, pudgy, and yummy. Like,
yeah, and hasn't had to like move in years.
Like yeah, like that thing. How is that thing alive? Does it not have to hunt? Like, what's going on? Like, how is that thing like? Does that thing hunt? Because I don't think so. Like, how is it alive if it doesn't hunt? Like, who's feeding? Like, what's feeding that one? Like,
yeah, it seems doomed or unsustainable or just really, really lucky for the time being, but just unsustainable in any case.
Right. It's like you mean that thing over there is not fending for itself. It's like the complete opposite of an elite, right? That's how I see elites. It's like, well, yeah, like you said, they're like in their mansions on a couch, they're chilling. But the moment the world shuts down, like they're done for it. Like they don't know how to fend for themselves physically, or like just not get sick. You know what I mean? Not get a common cold. Like how many elites can avoid the common cold because they just they're just doing stupid stuff and going out partying and thinking they're invincible because money can solve anything. Like most elites, I would say, just like don't have good health. I think I saw the stat. It's like, well, all the elites still die of the same diseases we die of, and like in higher numbers, right? It's like they just don't take care of themselves. So it's like, well, do you really want to be like that? Like that is not elite according to like another species, like in the biome, like you're saying. Like these are like the least suitable for vitality, essentially. It's like, well, what are they even doing? They're just eating and not exercising and not hunting and not fending for themselves and not like practicing the self-defense moves or whatever it is, right?
Well, that's the notion of being the elite within its own hierarchical structure of being the corporate CEO, fat cat person. And on that level, it looks unsustainable. And it also just showcases how anything can be like spun as the right priority, like consumption based and focusing on the economic aspect of it and obsessing over money. We can all say, well, we're getting a really good deal if we consume a whole bunch, even if it's bad for our health, because at least we got away with consuming that much over our lifespan. So it's all about however much we can consume, regardless of how fulfilling or how good we feel afterwards, whether we're fit or not or fulfilled, and we can definitely play into that mindset as consumers. You know what I mean?
Right. Like everyone wants to be king, emperor, chairman, whatever. But it's like, well, there was only one fat one in history amongst like hundreds of thousands maybe that work their butts off to like sustain an army or the farm or whatever to keep everyone else alive. The true fat one is just, yeah, there's only one, but everyone wants to be that one, right? And it's like, no, I don't think that's sustainable. I think any society, any kind of government, politics, anything that tries to propagate the idea that, oh, anyone can be a king, right? It's so unsustainable that it might as well just crumble now. Right? It's like, no, like I think organically, everyone, like thousands of people get together to listen to one. And I think somehow that's organic. I don't think it's organic for like there be like two managers for like five people or something, that kind of thing. No, I feel it's like,
Yeah, or
in the whole
five
city,
managers for
there's
five
one,
people
or yeah, like 1 to 1, or
within
like
a
even more.
hierarchical structure to make it look a
Right.
little better.
Dude, yeah, yeah, no, dude, okay, okay. The reason why I brought that up is I'm legit at the point where we have like six new managers and we hired two new like application engineers, right? So literally a 3-to-1 ratio, and they've been saying how we need to like up our like customer support in the field hours and stuff, and then they hired like six managers. What do they think they're gonna do? Like have these managers like direct people around six times more? It's like you still only have two people to work to do
Yeah,
the
well,
real
maybe
stuff.
they'll really efficiently through lean methods and that ideology or the scope of
Oh yeah.
that
Oh god, I can't
efficiency
believe you
in
said.
manufacturing and delivery of services and production and all. They're going to have a lean
Lean. Yeah,
specialist.
you said it.
That is
Oh
a
man, you
job that
said it.
exists.
You,
And I
s-
don't know if you've heard of that job, but it
dude,
is
I
one
know
which
you're talking.
may
Dude,
or may
I'm
not be tasked with going in
tilted.
and doing
Yeah,
anything to do with
dude, no, I'm so tilted by the lean
actually
position. Are you kidding
getting
me?
involved with the production or the
Of
delivery of
anything, but
services or the quality or analytical aspect of anything. And it's interesting because it is kind of its own ideology that exists in corporate structures that like has sort of, man, it's kind of inflammatory to say infected a whole bunch of corporations, I think, but it seems to be a very powerful kind of notion that gains traction in some companies who want to have this kind of extra level of managerial class involvement. You know what I'm saying?
dude, yeah, I mean, like, all right, you know what's really funny? All right, so I was in Apple, I was in their battery testing fab. So this is like an unmarked building that they have like somewhere on Walsh Avenue. Like, it's just like you don't know it's Apple unless you know, right? So I'm like in there and like, full bunny suits and stuff, right? And then they
Mm-hmm.
have I guess like a safety manager. I forget that, like a facility safety manager kind of thing, right? I
Mm-hmm.
forget the acronym. Um, and then okay, so I meet that guy. He tells me to put my glasses on. I'm like, oh crap, sorry, whatever. And then right
Mm-hmm.
behind him was a, what was it? A safety assistant. Okay, let that sink in. Okay, so I'm like, all right, so the safety manager's here. He's already telling everyone how to be safe. And then
Mm-hmm.
he has a safety assistant behind him. I'm like, what is your job? Like, are you just there to like pick up some unsafe stuff in case there's too many
Mm-hmm.
unsafe things going on that one person in front of you didn't already just tell everyone about? Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
you assisting? And I realized every time I go there, that girl's just following the main safety guy around and just like jotting notes down, right? And I'm
Well,
like,
yeah,
wait,
shadowing in
like,
case
are you
whenever he's not there to do something else
okay?
in his
Right.
spot.
But he's always there, right? So they
Uh huh.
literally hired the position for nothing. It's like I know that guy's always there. He's always like, yeah, I'm a contractor. Like I'll take every hour, I'll do it. Like I'll
Oh,
take overtime. I'll do all that stuff, right? And then they gave him like a safety assistant. And then like I don't know, maybe there's like some political stuff going on there, right? He doesn't want to like pass down the job or whatever. But it really just looks like she's just following him around, and her title is safety assistant. And I was like, I've never heard of that. Like you like only assist in certain unsafe situations, or like what I mean? Like, like it doesn't sound like it's like it's safety. You should be like absolutely responsible because it's safety. But assistant, like it just like almost like it detracts a little bit from like the seriousness of safety. But anyway, I I just thought that was such a BS position. And then okay, the lean stuff. Oh man, don't even get me started. Okay, like I thought, oh man, so okay, that's not even the worst. I think the worst is like hiring contractors to hire new hires. It's like, wait, so
Oh,
like you're not getting your managers who are eventually going to manage these people to like actually just spend 45 minutes to interview like the people they plan to work with for years from now on. You're going to hire a third party like like
recruiters.
corporation recruiters, right? To like recruit for you, even though you know they don't know as much as you do about your application, and you're gonna trust that they're gonna find you the best candidate for your application, right? It's like, why is that efficient? Like, you know,
No, it's not. It's
like,
only efficient in
like,
the
like,
very near term of, well, what is the money amount like and time commitment for me right now to like get the next hire? But then you don't think about the potential years down the road of actually working with this person, like you're saying, which is far more significant. I think we should really take that interview process seriously enough if we really want to retain people. But we almost don't have an economy of retention anymore. We have like an
right,
economy where there are some old guys and old gals who are 30-year veterans at a company who are now boomers about to retire right now. That still exists, as you may have seen, right?
right,
But for us millennial age people and Gen Zers, there's so little corporate loyalty. You have guys like me who work like 15 jobs in like a 10-year period, basically something like that, where there's no loyalty and
right,
people work for 3 or 4 years and that's like
right,
a duration. That's like a significant
right,
era of their job history, whereas in many places they last 3, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years if somebody is testing the waters for a while and finally realizing they don't like that industry eventually and moving on to something else. But you have a
right,
lot of cases where there's very little retention and it's all turnover, and you expect, depending on the industry obviously and the simplicity of the job tasks and ease to hire, to get people up to speed on those tasks. But you do see it where there's a median value in a lot of companies of like 3 to 6 months, and they're just always hiring. They always do it relatively poorly, but they just always want to hire as many people as possible to offset the people who are quitting or moving on or getting
right,
fired. And it's such an inefficient process that it's amazing we have HR and we have recruiting and ZipRecruiter and all these sites and everything is supposedly more efficient and easier than ever before to hire because it's global. We can hire anyone from anywhere to move in, out of state, and whatever. And we don't even care as much anymore if they're local. And so it should be way, way easier. But because it's so much less organic, it's way, way more difficult, less accurate of a process, and results in a worse outcome, if you know what I
right.
mean.
No, no, totally, totally, totally. Um, no, for sure, for sure. Um, man. Dude, I forget what I was just about to say about that, but uh, basically, it's just all just not sustainable. I mean, oh man, like I guess it's a combination of a couple variables. It's like I guess the whole fake economy thing plus everybody wanting to move up, quote unquote, right? And it's just like, why do people only stay for 3 4 years, maybe less, versus before where they had like 20 30 year like loyalty to a company? I think it's a sign of a dwindling economy, and the fact that like even though it's dwindling, the average American still thinks they can move up, right?
But more
Like,
people see through
and
it enough that if they're not given a good opportunity within the first couple of years, they're out of there.
right, there's this, yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So like, they're okay. So 20 years ago, there wasn't that mentality. It's like, all right, I'll just take this pay for like 20 years, whatever. Like,
Hmm.
I can make do because the economy was actually good then, right? It's like, well, you could just take that pay, maybe get the 5%, 3% raise every year or two, and then like you're good and it beats inflation. But now it doesn't, right? Now we have a generation of people after boomers, like you're saying, like the boomers got their got their stuff locked in, right? But for us, we're
Hmm.
screwed because we're like, okay, well, we want that boomer life, we want that, the quality of life of boomers, and we're aiming for that. But then it's like, wait, no, I can't do that. I'm making six figures. My wife's making over 30, 40, 50K, and we can't, like buy a house or something, right? And before it's like, oh, boomers, you have one income, they can buy a house. Like, we see that our parents tell us about it, and we grew up wanting it, knowing about it, and now it's like ripped from our hands, kind of thing, right? And then instead of really facing it organically, I think a lot of people just kind of, I don't know, do that sort of like a passive aggressiveness and just be like, oh well, I'm just an elite, I'm just gonna do me, I'm good, and I don't care what what the economy said, what people are. I'm good, like look at me, like I deserve to have a raise because look at I've been here for 6 months and I've contributed so much to your team. Your team can't do anything without me. That kind of thing. It's like no, you should shut up, like just do work and like prove yourself, and if you're really worth something then we'll like talk about it, that kind of thing, right? But no, everyone just feels so entitled to having more while doing less, and it's like, well, this is not the sign of a sustainable economy. I just think basically we're everything we talk about just convinces me that like we're going down, man. Like I mean, going not down. We're going to have to enter some sort of era of like mass spread discontent, possibly just actual rioting, and like it needs to happen. There needs to be that reset, right? Not an economical reset, because technically, I mean, interest rates went negative, whatever, in 2012. That's kind of a reset, right? But like, uh, I
Uh-huh.
would say it's more of a social political reset. But you can't do that unless enough people feel the tension from financial like strain, right? That's
Right.
literally, I think that's what it has to be. Unfortunately, right? It's the only way to get at people, the masses, hard enough is to take away their purchasing power, because then they might start to steal and they might start to loot, riot, whatever, right? The moment people, enough people realize, for sure, the Fed can't get away with this crap for very long. I would say by 2025, 2026, enough Americans, like you're saying, are going to catch on, right? They're going to be like, wait, hold on. You're saying interest rates are dropping, but I'm not able to buy the same car I bought 5 years ago, even though it's like the same capital cost or whatever it was, right? So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
I think most people will realize that even though the numbers are going down, their borrowing power and their spending power are all like they're also going down. It's not like things are actually getting cheaper, right? So when enough people realize that, enough people will just not want to look for work. The whole unemployment thing is two-sided, right? One side is companies wanting to make it look like they're hiring a lot of people, right? And they'll put
Mm-hmm.
out fake whatever job applicants. But then
Right.
the other side is from the job applicant side of people just not wanting to work anymore because they're like, it's not worth it. No job is worth my time for the amount of pay that I'm gonna get. I'd rather not work, right? And I know for a fact that is a more common mentality than you and I are probably willing to admit. But with that said, I think that is going to be the root of it, right? Which is enough people realizing they don't want to work. Not because they can't get a job or not getting offers. They could be getting offers, but they're like, oh, 80K for that? No. Whereas 20 years ago, it's like, oh, 80K, I'll take it. I don't care what I do. I'll do it.
Right.
80K. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So now it's that. It's like that, for example.
Right.
Right. Like, oh, if it's not if it's not a six-figure job, I'm not taking it. Like, you have like 1 year of experience throughout your entire life until now, right? At the Berkeley Research Lab, that's related to all this engineering stuff that you want, and you're saying you want to walk in, you want to be like glorified, right, as a UC Berkeley like graduate, and you want 100K. Like, what's like, okay, but this job, it's like on Glassdoor they said they're offering 85. It's like, yeah, but I'm worth 100K. It's like, oh, dude, are you kidding me? Like, you're barely worth the 80K. You'd be lucky if you get the. You should be happy if you get this 80K
Right.
going with 1 year of total of technical experience at age 34.
Well, it's that entitlement mentality of, well, other people got a better deal than they deserve, so I also deserve to get a better deal than I deserve as well, because I know something about what money is worth or something. Even if you're not productive, you don't really know what money is, because it all ends up being fake at the end of the day, as we kind of alluded to, and we all kind of are based off of what we're focused on, which in some time is swapping jobs out and looking for the better company to work for, and kind of nickeling and diming these offers of, well, can I get a 10% better offer here or there? And if I just keep on shuffling around all these corporations within my industry or whatever job market there is locally, then eventually I'll get that perfect deal where I have the perfect workplace I'm looking forward to that's slightly better pay than I'm currently making, where people are going to be slightly nicer or more in touch with my values or whatever. It's going to be an easier mesh socially to fit in there. There's going to be less friction, less corruption, and it'll be more efficient because I'll be getting paid more. I'm going to enjoy more of what I do, and I'll finally feel that I've become immune to the whole corruption loop of the financial system and the elites getting more than they deserve. I deserve that. But doesn't that just play right into it of pitting us against each other and pointing out how we all have bits of corruption within us that we have the ability to add into the corruption within the workplace of playing the blame game, pointing the fingers around and saying, well, however toxic of a culture there is at this corporation, at least I'm not making it more toxic than average to the temperature of toxicity that's going around socially, as I already see the room or read the room as portraying, right? And it's like, well, as long as I'm not making things noticeably, measurably worse according to my higher-ups and performance reviews or whatever, then at least I'm meshing with the system more. But it's like, isn't that one big corruption loop of being an unwinnable situation that a lot of people are still kind of trying to win, even though they know it's unwinnable because they complain about the corruption of it every time, but at the same time are looking for better jobs and being like, oh, I'm going to go work for that company. They pay 5-10% more. That'll solve everything because it is all about the money, even though we kind of know deep down on the corruption level that it's not. But I see a lot of people in those kinds of positions where they're looking for which company is the best to work for. And a lot of millennials, like I'm saying, are like this, switching every year or two. But is that the real solution of if there's like a staircase that's falling down off a cliff, do you just like walk up to the next step of the staircase or something? And it's still falling staircase, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, I don't know, one step forward, two steps back or something, right? But I would say, oh man, I guess I'll say this, dude. I'm gonna admit this. I think I'm more than ever willing to pull the plug on everything I knew about financial, like, uh, just literacy, right? It's like, well, in the sense of, oh, I need to, have this 8 to 5 job, I need to have a salary, I need to do this and that to sustain myself. I'm almost willing to pull the plug on all of it and just see how far the idea of if there's a will, there's a way, like how far that's going to take me, because it's worked for people, right? I mean, maybe that's the way. Maybe one by one, we all just need to like exit, not life, but like exit the system, right? But it's a really tough thing to do. Obviously, they completely spiral you into it, condition you to think that you can't do anything without it. But what if you just pull the plug on it?
But that would require
months?
everyone who has their cards in the system currently to admit that we're all going to fold at the same time. And it's so hard to get everyone to fold at the same time when some people have a better hand right now and they want the benefit of currently having the better hand of saying, well, not everything is corrupt. Some of our net worth or some of our assets and some of what we have is what we deserve. So we cannot just take away and rob Peter to pay Paul or whatever and have a better society all of a sudden. But it would require totally transcending on a level that everyone can somehow agree with no matter what. And that's the challenge of getting to people on that level when a lot of us don't really want to listen to anything that challenges our worldview whatsoever, which is a tough thing to do and to like be humbled. But I think it's a process we should all at least be receptive to because we haven't got it all figured out yet and are not all completely fulfilled in ourselves. You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, going back to your poker analogy, it's like only the elites have the better hand or the best hand, and everyone else is bluffing, right? And no one wants to fold. No one wants to fold their bluff. Everyone wants to keep bluffing until they lose their money, right? It's like I'm not going to fold. I'd rather lose my money than lose my ego or whatever it is. Like,
yeah, because maybe if I bluff at least as much as anyone else bluff, then maybe everyone will be bluffing so much that I didn't have much of a good hand, but neither did anyone else either,
Well, that is what it is, though. Ultimately, right? We're all just bloating our self-worth in front of social media. Like, no one actually, I mean, if you look at the real numbers, 70% of Americans are under. Like, but then if you look at social media, like, almost 90-something% of it is like, oh yeah, look at me, we're rich, we're doing this, blah, blah, blah. That. I'm like, this is the sign of a dwindling a nation, because any nation who's doing well for themselves isn't gonna put stuff like this on full blast. Like, look how rich I am. Look at this kid. Look how rich they are. Like, so you want to make money, this, that. Like, that's the sign of a crashing. That's like a country that thinks it's about to die and it wants to convince its people to get back on the game, kind of thing, right? And the other countries are doing well. I mean, all their social media, their like news commercials, infomercials have nothing to do with making money. They have more to do with like, oh yeah, family ties, like oh maybe medical stuff. I haven't seen a single medical commercial in like years. Everything's been about how to make money, how to save money, and car loans.
Because
Like
everyone
I
wants
just
to get in on, as we keep on mentioning, becoming one of the elites by being told the right way to
right.
become one of the elites, according to the elites who are already one of the elites within the current system, that they benefit and stand on their incentives to pump the success of and the continued notion of us all focusing on it. When if we just drop back and look at what is of actual value, we have to wonder what that is. What is of actual value? And we think monetary value is the main, because it's market based, it's measured, it's the actual notion of value because we think of it in terms of numbers. But we all know also that it's qualitative and sentimentality and well-being that can't really be measured, because you'd have to be measuring someone's consciousness, like within and subconscious tendencies, and not just what they're saying or what can be recorded externally. And so what is of value is a tough question that leads off into kind of the spiritual at some point, and yes, is just like the social level is the way that it would be presented in polite society of, do you have the social circles you want? And I think just getting on that level, it already kind of trails off into the controversial, because I think a lot of people would have fewer like people they can confide in than they would want in general in the modern society, and particularly millennials who, once they get out of college, and are all on this work track of making ends meet, and like you're saying, 70% living paycheck to paycheck, leaves them with very little chance for fulfillment in the way they really want it. And it's hard to come up with a way to get enough people to admit that, but I guess I'm willing to admit that, and I think a lot of people are clearly going through the same thing, but to admit it on some level kind of feels better because then you are assessing a situation and seeing how it can be improved. But it seems like what a lot of us also want to do is just go into those awkward moments where we don't want to talk to anyone, so we just go on our phones, and it's like, okay, everyone else is going on their phones as well, so I guess that's good enough for them, and we don't have to break the ice on this situation. You know what I mean?
right,
We can just not
right.
communicate, but act like we're having fun because we're looking at playing games on our phones and looking at TikTok or scrolling through YouTube shorts and entertaining ourselves and laughing or something. So at least everything seems good enough on its own local level. If you chalk it up to individuals entertaining themselves on their phones, not quite fully socially, but only through social media, and it's like, well, where's the transparency on how everyone's actually feeling? And it feels like it's thinly veiled, but there's this large incentive to keep it all on hold as far as letting it all out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, totally. And I guess it's so meta. And I guess what I was kind of wanted to say is like the money is total currency times unit value. Okay, and like
Mm-hmm.
dollar value, whatever it is, right? So that's where there's difference between currency value and money, and even money itself is meta because it is kind of like kind of a ledger thing for, hey, I owe you this deed because you did me that deed, and that's the money aspect. Well, they come up with money, this idea of money, this IOU thing, that's money, right?
Which is
And
a
but then they
social
say, oh,
contract on
right,
paper.
right. But what I'm saying is, it is already not the end goal right there, right? The end goal is still getting the deeds done for you, or doing deeds for you, or just bettering your own quality of life, right? But people not only think money is the goal, they completely misconstrue what the definition of money is. They think currency is the goal, right? They want to see this number, this USD value go up in their bank account.
For
Now we're
them, but not
completely
for others, because we want to see
right,
prices
right.
drop, but we want our own
But
sales to go up.
that's meta within meta. You know what I mean? Because
Right.
that's like money's already meta, and then currency is even more meta than money because you have to divide currency into these random value. That who's valuing this? Like we're not
Right.
valuing it. We're not valuing currency. So our like transactions and stuff are completely based on, it's centralized, right? I mean that's what it is. But like we're not dictating what our worth really is based off of, organic transactions, which is in the end of the day, like what really matters in the society is these organic transactions, not all this meta crap that's like basically red taping everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at some point we have to realize that as people, where it's like, okay, not only should we stop looking at currency, we have to stop looking at money. We have to look at just pure value of like the stuff that we want and the stuff that we're able to offer, right? A value on the level that's like not money, but like social value, right? Maybe not in terms of social contracts, because you could get misconstrued into social contracting, right? It's like, no, it's not that, right? It's like for one good deed, you agree with the opposite party that, you make an agreement that your good deed is worth that other good deed from that party. It doesn't matter from an absolute point of view if there's a third party coming in,
Right.
like mediating it, like saying, oh, that's not fair for person A, person B. No, you don't want that's all noise. Like if two people agree on a transaction, that should be it. And I'm going to loop this all into cryptocurrency because that's what it is. It's a decentralized system where you set your own contract, you build whatever you want on the blockchain, and then anyone else on a node on a blockchain can accept your custom contract 100% written by you, not some centralized organization that's
Right.
overlooking the transaction, right? So again, I think cryptocurrency might be a way out, but it's probably not going to work. But it's the most promising thing I've seen in the last 15, 20 years.
Right. Well,
So
on this decentralization front, it seems pretty appealing, and it's still being measured relative to fiat currencies, so it is in some way intertwined with fiat currencies as they currently exist in terms of ratios and what it's valued at
oh, sure,
towards the
but
dollar. But in terms of base level value and what people get out of social situations, I think is to actually not necessarily measure it on a transactional level of digits of good deeds or bad deeds or lack thereof being measured in people's minds. I think in all kind of summations, it sums up at some point to just vibes, which is kind of weird because we're being analytical and statistical about things to a certain extent, but then it all loops back in to, well, it's all whether people subconsciously feel that the relationship between themselves and that other person is still on good enough terms that it will continue to get better, and people will still continue to learn more about each other enough to know each other's needs enough to know what they consider is contributing to them or not. Because there's this irony relative to, let's say, the golden rule, where it almost gets it wrong. Because unfortunately, if we were all exactly the same, then we would all want to be treated exactly the same. So you would be able to get away with always treating the golden rule as absolute, because all you have to do is know that you have to treat other people exactly the way you would want to be treated. But it's all perceptions of how does anyone else want to be treated relative to the house. How do they see you relative to them? And do you want to be treated more harshly than the average person in similar situations, or how high of a standard do you hold yourself to, and do they hold themselves to that standard? And it almost destabilizes the notion of the social contract, unfortunately, with what I'm saying, because there are these margins of error around empathy that we can't really get rid of. But like, it almost makes it like there is this irony in the golden rule where you can try to follow it as a guideline, but it doesn't always even necessarily succeed, unfortunately, at a certain point. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, I mean, I feel like humans are organically, any species it is it's relative. They care about relative things. Absoluteness is, I think, fake because it basically is like perfection, right? It's like, well, from what reference frame are you saying that absolute thing is that absolute, right? Like basically everything's still relative. Basically what I'm saying is, well, relative to, all right, like, okay, like I want that person to wash my dog, and I guess like maybe I'll offer them like but this $20 wallet I have that I know they want, right? But it's only worth $20, and the normal dog wash now is like, I don't know, $500 or something. So somebody, some third party, centralized party could come in right now and be like, oh, so that dog wash is $500, your wallet's $20, and then all of a sudden the party that wanted to do the exchange doesn't feel good doing the exchange
Mm-hmm.
anymore. The dog wash person's like, well, mine, this task I'm doing is apparently worth like 25 times that crappy wallet you have, even though like if that third party wasn't there, they would have been like, I kind of need a wallet, and I'll wash your dog, right? but now that would have been relative. That's what I mean
Mm-hmm.
by relative versus absolute. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, we instead of setting an absolute price to these two things, we're just relatively agreeing between two parties that this is an acceptable deal, and that's how organically things should unfold. But we're all convinced to not do that in the society. We're convinced to look at absolutes, which is in itself very inorganic, right?
Well, to see the level of equality assumed be that, well, whatever the average person's review or opinion of this certain product is going to absolutely align with mine, so therefore I have to buy
Right,
based off of what the rating is to the absolute point 0.1 or zero point
right,
zero 0.01 or something. And we are not the average person as individuals. Everyone has some deviation from the norm on some level, right? So
right,
it's hard to
right.
get in on assuming you're exactly as the rest of the average is and assuming that you are going to be pleased with that situation of being totally fitting in with the system enough to be totally average on as many levels as possible, because we don't really like being completely average. We only like the benefits of blending in and getting at least as much as the average person or whatever in terms of being average to the beneficial side of that. But we don't want the mediocrity aspect of just being some drone within the system. We don't like the cog and the machine mentality of being average. So there's that benefit and cost, and we always kind of want the benefit, but we're not willing to shoulder the cost because it makes everything kind of bland and not personal anymore. You know what I mean?
Well, the thing is, we all want to feel average, but we don't want to look average, right? It's like this weird thing of like, the whole mentality of, oh, I want to be rich, but I don't want people to know about it. It's like you want to, it's like you want to, I don't know. It's like, I guess what am I saying? Like, for a lot of people, I guess I don't know. What I mean by that is no one wants to feel like they're an outlier unless they do, right? I think most people want to feel like, from deep down when they go to bed at night, it's like, all right, like, no one's on my, no, no one's on me kind of thing, right? No one's after me, right? Like, it's no one knows about me, right? Everyone wants that, but everyone also wants to be rich, which then makes you very visible and vulnerable to attackers like that. So it's like this weird discrepancy, even within like each individual, right? It's like, well, you want to be down low, but you also want this stuff that doesn't make you down low, right? That doesn't make you low key anymore, right? It's like everyone wants to play life low key or something deep down, but then the things they do aren't low key.
Well, it goes back to wanting to be the elites and how we still all kind of as individuals want to be greeted and respected wherever we go, kind of, and even if we don't want to be bothered and we want to remain kind of low key, I think a lot of us still want to be able to walk into an area and feel like we matter enough to have changed the atmosphere of the room or something. Unless we are of the personality type where we don't want to gather too much attention or something, which is some of us, but I think a lot of people still want the notion of being respected as like a competent individual who matters whenever we walk in anywhere.
You know, man, yeah, that oh gosh, like I mean, obviously now I'm just getting like being a psychiatrist, but it's like, yeah, I'm playing psychiatrist now, but it's like, yeah, those people all just have like some sort of emotional problems from childhood or something. Like, they just need to like settle their demons and move on with it, like just get on with it. But like, yeah, you're right. I think the majority of people do want to stand out. They want to look like an elite. I guess. Yeah, I guess I'm wrong. I'm only saying what I feel, which is I don't want to. I want to feel normal, and I don't want to stand out. Right? I want to feel kind of like an elite, and I don't want to stand out. I guess is what I'm saying. But like, for most people, they want to feel like one, and they want to stand out as well. So, yeah.
Well, because that's how you get in on being the elites and being the one who benefits from what you think is the current system. But if the current system is not beneficial to the entirety of society, then isn't it on average not beneficial to anyone? Like, it can only be beneficial for any unsustainable process for a short period and for a dwindling supply of people who are considering themselves on the top of the hierarchy, right? So if that is unsustainable and it leads eventually to a revolution of some kind, then it would have to be made an argument that it would be worse overall, that it is not beneficial overall, meaning the elites or whoever would just have to be able to figure out a way to care about things outside of themselves, and that depends on how much people identify as, like, do we identify as individuals or do we identify as a whole society or a nation, or what level do we put our influence out at and see ourselves as together. If we believe really that we're all in this together, which everyone kind of knows we are, because nobody had control over their own birth or whatever, just kind of like somehow living as like organic blobs that didn't plan on living. So it's like, how could anyone say they're any different, basically? But that kind of just trails off, like I keep on doing, into this philosophical notion that is, I think, uncomfortable for the majority of people to have the kind of conversation of, because I think it kind of is the case that we all kind of fear that we need to push the elitist mindset, even if we're pointing ourselves out as like beneath the elites in the hierarchy. We still kind of wish that we can see into it and not see through it enough to still have the chance of going up the bureaucratic system or whatever, the hierarchy of everything. And we all kind of want that hierarchical distinction for ourselves and to believe in the dream or whatever that's unsustainable, even though we all kind of know it's already not sustainable. So it's kind of weird. I'm trying to explain why it's so difficult to have these kinds of conversations even with the majority of people, right? It's like, I'm sure everyone knows deep down that this system's not working. We all kind of know that that's what's being said and that's how people feel. But why are we like not capable of going about uniting in ways that'll actually fix it, instead of, doing all the infighting that we succumb to a whole bunch of the time?
Yeah, I feel like it's somewhere rooted in enlightened self-interest, because you need a group mentality kind of situation. It's like, okay, like you want something, but you can't attain it yourself. And you know that the whole group of other people want the same thing. And if you work together, you could get it, right? But no one's thinking, oh, I want this whole group to attain this object. They're thinking, I want that object, and I can't get it myself, right? So enlightened self-interest. But you're not going to tell that to the group because you want to work with them. You want them to think you're on a team to get this thing. So there's that discrepancy. There's already like an absolute discrepancy there, right? Between like intention, organic intention, and like outward, whatever intentions, right? So that's already, I think that's where it stems from, right? The thing you're talking about. It's like, how do you get to people? You can't, because everyone has enlightened self-interest. How do you convince them to not have it, right? Just be solo or something. Like, how do you, I don't know, right? Like, how do you convince people to not have enlightened self-interest within a group of people working towards a quote unquote similar goal kind of thing, right? And it's like, we have all these support groups and stuff, this and that group, like, you know what I mean? Like social media groups. These are all just a bunch of collectives of people with enlightened self-interest. And no one's actually thinking about the group. They're only thinking about their own outcome, that what they can get out of this group for themselves, right? That's most people in society, in my opinion, right? You and I may not be like that, but I think the majority of people are. So, anyway.
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of the times we might actually, and there's good and bad in corruption and good or whatever in everybody, and maybe you go in with better intentions. Maybe you go in thinking it's going to be this organic thing and you're going to be adding value to everybody, and then it ends up being about promoting your own distinguished characteristics within the group, which ends up becoming its own hierarchy. And it's hard to get everyone to reject as many hierarchies as possible, because so many of us believe in so many of them that we still hold on to the slight belief of lucking out and winning the lottery or so within one of the hierarchies that we think will guarantee that we'll get rich quick or whatever and have it made and finally be able to enjoy the elitism that we wish we had. But maybe it just always ends up destabilizing into some inorganic process, and that's the difficulty. You can't really solve all of society's problems as an individual, no matter how much you talk or give guidance or work at it. You have to somehow have faith on some level that people's subconscious survival instincts, their vibes will kick in, and they'll realize that you actually want the good for everybody. And that's a hard thing to do, because there are good actors and there are not so good actors, but there are people who can play a part, politically or whatever, that they're on your side. They want you to succeed, even though their incentive is to enrich their own power for this purpose. and you're wondering, is it possible to even distinguish or know if you even have good intentions? And,
Dude, it's
I
too
ask
many
myself,
layers.
I don't know if I
Right.
have the possible best idealistic intentions, except to know that I do not, because I am not perfect. Therefore, if you just take the whole Bible notification on goodness with that book saying, well, why do you call me good? There are none good but God. And, that passage saying, well, we can't hold a standard of perfection and actually measure up to it, because anything over infinity is obviously zero every time. So we are zero and we're trying to be heroes. But is idealism even worthy to strive for? Or how do you even know if you are on the right path relative to the
Okay,
corruption
yeah.
you are rallying against? It's like hard. You almost have to point out that you yourself could be corrupt as well in order to get people to believe that, wow, this guy is admitting even he is fallible and he's not the savior of all humanity, because he's saying he's below savior status and everyone is equal, really. We just all have to get better at ourselves, basically. I mean, something like that.
Sure. Yeah, dude.
The ability to perceive or root out your own bias and test your own bias openly without knowing the result of it publicly, I think, is something that a lot of people will not expose them to maybe the benefits of, because they see the costs only. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. They're too scared to be judged by comments on social media or something. But yeah, sure. Um, I mean, so basically, what are we getting? We're basically saying it's not possible to convince people to like look at things
Well,
the right.
as long
But
as
what is the right
we're
way?
looking at things totally on those terms of the system as is, the monetary system, and the financial engineering of the Fed and all, and the money printing and all the Federal Reserve and the Treasury notes and the U.S. government and all, if we all are focused on the system and annuities, whatever it is, on
Sure.
financial asset level, that is the system we live in. But is it the main priority? And once it becomes transactionalized and we want everything to be recorded and on that transaction ledger, everything measured, everything taxable, everything within a transactional appeal to the elites of recording everything, having us all under surveillance as much as possible, making sure we root out all transactions as being observed and sanctioned by government and levying taxes on them and all, we can eventually see that we are focused enough on it that we eventually have such a big stake within the system that we can't admit that we could be wrong about it the whole time. And we're at some kind of breaking point where I know deep down everyone knows that what is real, because we still are the same organisms that have evolved along with apparently the rest of the organisms on this planet that see through. If they were to look at our financial system, they would look at us doing things in an insane way. And I think there's always hope, and there's an ability to revolutionize, and our challenge is to revolutionize in hopefully the most peaceful way possible. It's usually very hard to avoid conflict and armed revolution whenever there's a revolution, obviously. So maybe we are also doomed to that path, but obviously I hope not. And maybe we just need to speak out so much on such a radical level that, not necessarily radical left wing or radical right wing on that political linear spectrum even, but just radical in terms of transcending all these weird fractal layers of corruption that everyone realizes they're in, that we are also in, to realize that we could easily just give it all up and reset, and everything would be better if we gave it another shot on what is of value. For example, what is value? Can we recodify what it means to have a more real currency that is related to our own sustenance, our survival, units of calories or something, or units of shelter, or measuring things in ways that are survival-based units? There's notions of risk factor and micromorts, like millionths of a chance that you'll die based off of some occurrence, and that's played itself out in actuarial circumstances of insurance rates and things. And these things are baked into our finance system, but we could also have some kind of system from a theoretical aspect of doing thermodynamics on economics or something that comes up with a way that, maybe I'm being too digital and analytical about it still, but maybe there's a way to frame everything on the level of rooting out just how corrupt our system is in terms of the fact that some things may be valued at millions or billions of dollars, but have a survival-based value of exactly zero or something, depending on how you put it. And maybe that could flip the whole notion of existence or something in a lot of people's minds to make us have an extra scale to trip out over and perceive the value of in real terms, because a lot of things are not on record as being very high value, but they provide a lot of survival value. So maybe, a cow is worth more than a human or something. Enough people could eat it or something. I mean, I don't know, just things like that, like the survival-based value, and then there's economic value that could be totally removed from anything that has any real value of sustenance or happiness and fulfillment. So I've said a lot with that, but that is a really lengthy and, hopeful framework on how to redevelop our minds on what anything is at this point.
I mean, there are no metrics on historical suppression in any nation, but I feel like American people are already so suppressed that we do have to go to revolution. I mean, so like we were saying earlier, it's either that or we somehow systematically try to talk to each person, each group, each individual, start from the individuals, then go to the group, then you go to community, town, city level, right? Because you got to permeate from from bottom up, right? So it's how are you going to change people's mentalities when they don't trust you and you can't even trust yourself to prove your position? You know what I mean? We're all so confused because we're suppressed, right? It's no one knows the real reality of anything and what anyone else could be thinking or what they could be thinking about you or what you should really be thinking about them or whether or not the basis of upon your understanding of anyone is even good or anything, right? So everyone's in limbo out here. Everyone's waiting to be told what's real, right? And in that kind of society, I'm willing to bet that it is basically impossible for someone like you and me to convince any one person or group of people to look at things the way that we look at it, because it's what's your credential, right?
Yeah, it's I'm a human being who's been around for a while, just seen a few things, and I'm just looking and taking it all in and analyzing it the same as you are, or on whatever level you want to get in on for it, and I'm also willing to get in on that level at least, if not any other level, and do these thought experiments or however much we can try real world experiments on different ways of thinking about things and making actions that are actually going to benefit us on the fulfillment level rather than purely the financial level, which can seemingly benefit for us for a while, but everyone is realizing is kind of not for everybody because it's for the elites. And it's I do begin conversations where I'm trying to hint at the fact that we have this corrupt system, and you can get these responses out of people where they do realize it's corrupt. They will tell you that the food supply is compromised while at the same time manufacturing food and doing exactly what they say is part of the system, or working for Big Pharma while claiming Big Pharma is corrupt. And we're all still kind of stuck in this system where we are living off of the hand that we don't want to feed us anymore, but we almost always succumb back into the loop of letting it feed us still. And you talk to people where it's they're looking for ways outside of the system, and they're watching podcasts or these people telling them on their email list of what penny stocks to invest in, and they're looking at how to become better at calling the markets and doing day trading to try and get out of the system of their job they're currently in that they don't like enough. And everyone kind of, it feels like once you talk to them on that level, knows that there's corruption, but their way out of it is to still loop back in on those telling them what to do, because we have all wanted to be told what to do this whole time in order to not have to make consequential, accountable actions that could get very much heated discussions or being eliminated from the job, from the market, job market for saying the wrong thing or not being politically correct, but bringing up the wrong thing. And I think a lot of people are so deeply entrenched in that anytime you even bring up the ability to revolutionize peacefully by working on ourselves enough to become enough of an organic market to get off the whole financial system as far as how much toil it has on our minds and our mindsets and our lives, basically, to where it's hard to have good intentions because people are still judging you by the same standards that they also deep down already know is corrupt about the whole system. So they think you are also being corrupt on some level by trying to sell them and tell them what to do, when what if it's all one big social experiment and nobody is at the top of it, and we just need the whole decentralization aspect of everybody having a part and a say in what is going to come next. And it's about getting enough people on the same team to honestly be willing to put their thoughts out there and be transparent while realizing that they don't know everything as an individual brain, but that we can get better at knowing as much as possible collaboratively if we want to go there.
Basically, I can't believe I'm saying this. Like, Big Brother is probably going to be actually good for us. It's to be something closer to a socialist society than now, and that might actually solve some things, right? It's like, well, because like you're saying, we want to be told everything. We want to be told, including value, right? Okay, well, we have this. If you have a decentralized Big Brother kind of system, some computer node, right, or nodes, right, across the world, dictating what everyone deserves from just a unit value point of view, then yeah, okay, the social credit score, whatever you want to call it. I mean, maybe that is another way out, right? Maybe that does. I mean, we don't want it now because we're so into the whole idea of freedom and stuff, but we don't even have that. Like, we don't even have the freedom to own land. Even, like, the government will take it back anytime, right? So that's like the most basic thing, right? It's like land, owning land, right? It's like we can't even own that. Then it's basically nothing already. So I don't know, man. I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's basically the system has to collapse on itself.
Well, that's
Right.
interesting because the notion of rights is hard to just codify into law and make it real in real terms, because as you're saying, eminent domain rights of the government to buy up or seize your land for whatever price it wants to means that the whole notion of rights of property goes away, even though it's supposedly the government that is supposed to protect our rights. But really,
Right.
in a way, as you're implying, it's kind of unworkable. And the only way to really have rights is to do the right thing for ourselves. And it becomes right that we have that thing that we think it is right to have. So, in other words,
Sure.
it's only our own responsibility that gives us rights. And unfortunately, that implies that there are no rights. Well, there are rights in terms of moral rights and wrongs for whatever worldview we are measuring morality relative to, but there are no rights in terms of somebody has to do something for you to guarantee your subsistence or existence or something on the level that you consider comfortable, because who has ever done that before to anyone else in history of being able to exist as an organism and not think that you have to take care of yourselves on some level, because that is the infantile mindset. And I think enough of us kind of are, as we see the instability of the hierarchical structure and everything being corporatized, seemingly getting everyone in this more infantile mindset to where we're not quite growing up as fast because we've kind of given up on fully branching out and reaching our full potential, I guess. And like I said, it's a humbling thing, and it's tough to get other people to want to also work on themselves while you work on yourself kind of deal. And not everyone has that whole self-deprecating type personality or shame-based culture or whatever you want to call it, but a lot of it is more macho type reasoning of pumping yourself up with the whole, bluffing your way into becoming one of the elites by just stating it on papers and such, and through within not just papers but the current corporate system of the things you say at meetings or whoever you help out that is going to help you out within the selfish corporate structure of going up the hierarchy, right? Like,
Right.
how do you convince someone that it is not only for your own individual self-interest that you are conversing with them? And it's like, maybe we are so past that. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe we're too culturally out of sync with each other as individuals on a country level or world, whatever you want to call it, that maybe revolution will have to be in a way that we don't want it to be. But we might as well try, I guess, and see what happens.
This is something I think I've thought about since like college, right? And I feel like it's so intense now. It's gotten so much worse, which is the whole concept of ego being higher than self-esteem. And now the discrepancy has gone like ridiculously, like now the gap's huge, right, on the average person, in my opinion. It's like most people, a lot of people, all right, have much higher ego than self-esteem. And what I mean by that is like, okay, I mean, they think they're hot stuff, right? They think they're alpha. And then, the moment they have to actually self-reflect, it's like, no, that's too painful. I'm too cool. I'm too good for that, right? It's like, I'm too good to self-reflect. But no one is that, right? You're lying to yourself. If you're not doing that, you're emotionally damaging yourself. And a lot of people don't even realize that, right? So it's like, okay, so a lot of people are already like forcing themselves to be miserable out of ego. It's, at the end of the day, it's kind of what it is. And how do you talk them out of that? I don't know if you can.
No, because it's circular reasoning,
think,
and it's whatever you want to
right,
continue to believe that you are justified in
right.
considering yourself like better off than anyone else's reasoning. And a lot of people
The only,
don't really want to learn because we already have to go through such a long, painstaking process of what we think is learning, which is the modern education system, that once you get through 22, 24 years, however long it takes to get all your credentials, it's like, well, I made it. I don't want to learn anymore. Nobody can tell me what to do. I've made it. And I don't know. It's really unfortunate that there's this disincentive to like want to continue to learn or work on whatever self-improvement, because once you're an adult and you're just like in the corporate world and you're just sustaining yourself because you're making enough money to survive, that it's like, no, nobody can tell me the way. But what if nobody knows the way and we all just have to come to it together as a collaboration? How do you get that decentralized knowledge source that does not have the worst interest in mind? I guess it's just impossible. There's no way to always have the best interest in mind. There's always going to be things that eventually end up getting the worst side of the best interests. For anyone going in, you always have better or worse decisions you can make into any venture. So on that basic level, there's always room for corruption. And then once there is room for corruption, there's incentive for corruption. And then once there's incentive for corruption, there's an exponentially increasing incentive for corruption that eventually balloons out of control until enough people see through it and realize it's so unsustainable that it just fractures everything and it becomes revolutionary and it just collapses. And then history repeats itself. So as we know, history repeats itself because we think we are immune to history and don't need to learn about it. So that's why it's always repeating itself, right?
Right, and it's going to repeat itself. I mean, going back to the whole like ego, higher than self-esteem thing. It's like, well, how do you talk people like that out of it? You threaten their life. As simple as that. I'm not saying you point a gun in their head. You threaten their financial stability. You threaten their ability to maintain good health. You threaten the stability of the futures of their children. Right? Like that's literally what any nation should do to just massively blank slate its people. Right? And it's like, you know what I mean? Like how do you talk someone out of their mental loops that you can't
Mm-hmm.
logically, systematically do it? You literally just have to do what you would do to a 3-year-old. You hit them.
Right. You have to showcase that this
Yeah.
line of reasoning goes down very, very unfortunate paths. And it's very hard to even do that still, though, because we are in such good shape in terms of not being at the brink of starvation in the first world for the most part. And everything is still, not empty at the shelves at the grocery store aisles and all, that I guess only the moment that the majority would realize it would be once the actual, system of our infrastructure and all our supply chains actually collapses, the level that we saw in March 2020 during the COVID shutdowns when we had these shortages of toilet paper and all. And we saw people's irrational decisions and lack of preparation into what ended up being a really big scare psychologically that took its toll on a lot of people. But at the end of the day, not too bad of a pandemic relative to others if we really think about it and think about the sensationalization period that we went through for it. And unfortunately, a lot of people succumb to it. But we talk about sometimes the worst pandemic in centuries, according to the current vice president. She said the worst one in centuries, I think, at the debate. But I would disagree and say that probably we had an incentive. Yeah. There have been plagues and there have been Ebola and bubonic plague and things that have been far higher in fatality rate, maybe 50% fatality, relative to what was a scare tactic of 4% when we were measuring only the morbid cases in China, when we were measuring the most morbid possible cases where it's obviously the case that we can choose one morbidity there, then we were kind of oversampling. There's a sampling bias to the mortality rate as you start a disease being observed. I guess kind of wording that strangely, but you know what I mean. And over time, it became less than 1%. And over time, it was stated that, well, eventually everyone got the disease and everyone gained some kind of level of immune response to it, so that everyone kind of became immune over time, and it became no longer a big deal. But it's like, why would that happen over a period of a couple of years and for us to be so scared and to really shut down and consider who is essential or non-essential? It's a very weird time psychologically to be human when it doesn't need to be. Like we are inevitably on the path of where it is a strange time psychologically to depend on thousands of people, but to feel entitled to not have to interact socially with them, where it's all transaction based, and it's like an awkward place for civilization to be in, where it's almost more destabilizable. It's more unstable than ever, and that kind of paints a weird picture for the near or midterm future for the majority of people. Maybe we are screwed, but I think a lot of people will just choose not to play the system, or, like you're saying, feel entitled to the unemployment benefits within the system, which is still trying to play the system. And what we really have to do is transcend the whole thing. That's the most difficult thing of all. So if we had to go become Amish or whatever, like, I guess they're the ones doing it right. Whoever is closer to the old school village, like you're saying, small village in Malaysia or whatever, subsistence level existence. And it for some reason always comes back to that, because those are the people who don't know what else is going on in the rest of the world, but they're fulfilled within their own social context of their village. And apparently that's the good life that everyone wants, because when we flash images of advertisements and all, it's always this scenic, free road with no traffic and just rural looking landscapes and everything just looking old school, like it did back centuries ago, before the whole industrialization, deindustrialization, post-industrialization, and the new globalized tech era, where everything is teetering on the edge of dystopia, basically. Or we're very deep in what's already a deep dystopia that we're kind of urgently supposed to be admitting at this point and doing something to transcend, basically, somehow.
I mean, I feel like, I think we're getting at, well, you're tapping into it, and that's like kind of going tangential almost. It's like, a lot of fractal loops. You're saying like, history repeats itself, right? A lot of fractal loops are closing within our lifetime, is what I'm calling. It's like, there are historical loops that every 150 years, yet global superpowers that fall and rise, that loop's closing for America, right? And then you zoom out even further, like every 1,000 years, every 2,000 years, you have like religious, I don't know, just like conditioning throughout the world, like people traveling, spreading Christianity, whatever it is, right? That happens every 2,000 years. And then you have the human civilization thing that happens every 5,000 years. That's also closing. I'm pretty sure all these fractal history loops are like closing during our lifetime. We're literally at the cusp of like, you know what I mean? Like it's like all the planets aligning at the same time, right? Like everything is about to like be at the same like position relative to like the orbit around the sun or something, like in the sense of like history, right? Like even like the really large orbits that take a long time and the short orbits that take a really small amount of time, everything's lining up somehow.
Yeah,
right?
I
Like,
have heard the
something
same
has to
thing
reset.
said by YouTube historian What If Alt-Hist guy makes the statement that these cycles are all aligning on the multi-generational cycle of 80 years or so since the World War, and the multi-century cycle of how long U.S. has been a country, and then the Aquarius millennium level cycle of the age of Aquarius, or whatever we're transitioning into now, and how these all kind of align with our current civilization, and that could be indicating a lot of instability coming in the next couple of decades, or this lifetime at least.
in this lifetime, I think in this lifetime we will see like the absolute brink of instability of the human civilization that has happened in like the last 4 or 5 thousand years. Like we legitimately are going to see the most unstable moment of this human civilization within our lifetimes, right? I'm calling that. Like, like other civilizations in the future, like we may not even recognize it within ourselves. Other civilizations in the future might look back and be like, wow, that time between like 2030 and 2050 was crazy. That changed everything about humans, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if we were just gonna live through that? Like, and then in the same time, we're wondering how we're gonna think our way out of it, how we can convince people out of it. It's like, no, we can't. This is literally like a gigantic monster of a thing that's way bigger than either one of us or anyone we know or any historical textbook that we could reference. Like, this is so huge, right? Something crazy is happening. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
just don't know. I can't put a finger on it, right? Like,
Yeah, and
we're trying to
unfortunately,
put a finger on it. Right.
we can
Right. We're
totally
trying to.
look at what are the facts and we can disagree on them because it's all about what the Bureau of Labor Statistics is reporting, how they're measuring inflation versus an unemployment and the economy and the GDP numbers. What are the stats versus what does it actually feel like on the ground just to live? And how do people actually feel about the economy? Can we agree whether the economy was better now or 4 years ago or 8 years ago, whatever you want to call on the political scale? And we seemingly cannot agree because some people will say the economy is currently on a good trajectory and is better now because we can change how we're perceiving the relative health of the economy with the current administration's statistics adjusting however they want to push the success of the current administration. And then there's the effect of kind of trying to see through the BS and wondering on a life organic level within yourself and your community and all and everyone you know, is everyone actually feeling better off or are we getting screwed over? And I think most people know that it's unstable, but there's a very large minority of people who still kind of toe the party line of saying that the current system is doing well because it says it's doing well. So there are many of us by the millions who are still kind of banking on kind of sucking up to the system and hoping that helps because we can still get entitled to at least as much as it's willing to divvy out for us because of how it unfairly, enriched the rich people. So we should also get in on being a little richer, even though it means printing the money that's going to inflate everyone else's money as well, and it's all one big pyramid scheme.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's another thing, right? It's like the whole like financial system, banking system was put in place for the same reason why, same stuff we're complaining about now. It's like, well, the older people then wanted to have a better way to preserve their money or whatever, to make better transactions or whatever. It wasn't for the young people. And after they die, their system's still here. We have to live with it, right? And it's like, well, we don't look at it the same way they did. They may have had really good organic intentions when it came to like, oh, here's a vault, save your stuff, we'll keep it safe kind of thing. And now it's turned into something different because the original people who thought of the idea died out, and like history repeats itself because, like you said, bad actors always come in, right? And it's enough bad actors, it's a snowball effect, right? And then enough people see that bad actors, they're like, wait, hold on, I can either do stuff genuinely organically and stress myself out, or I can just cheat, be like that guy, and just get the same result, right? And so, and then enough people do that, and then everyone's fake. And now we're getting to the point where everyone's fake. Everyone is basically like, wait, how can I do the least amount possible? How can I literally contribute the least to society while getting the most out of it, right? That's literally where we're at. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
organically, we're like, from a very fundamental level, that's the most fundamental level I can think of that we're failing on. And if we're already failing that, I'm pretty sure this is too far gone, right? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
well, it's worth a
chances, yeah,
try,
yeah,
and
it
some of
is
us
worth the
will
try.
do
Yeah,
okay and will do relatively better than average, but it's all the fact that not everyone is going to, by definition, do better than
by that.
average. But what you're saying is the average person is relatively screwed over the next few decades if what they consider to be stable and reliable coming their way goods wise and shelter resources wise and capital whatever is going to be sustainable and for the rest of our and their lives. And what you're saying is on average it's not going to be, and we're going to have a lot of things that we're going to have to part ways with materially basically, and we're going to have to somehow be okay with that and not blow over because of that. And enough people have to be prepared for that to like slide into that gradually, I guess. Or are we already kind of doing that with the whole, oh, everything's good now. Inflation's only 3% now. So even though it was 10, 12% and it accumulated up to 50% higher on these groceries for a few years, like at least things look okay on the jobs. You know, we can always slide our way into thinking everything's still okay, I guess. And do we need to, or do we need to? Yeah, I'm still trying to get at how do we transcend that, and I guess it just still comes back to the organic, person-to-person level of trying to bring out the best in each person and get them to snap out of the system that we all know we need to snap out of. But it's hard to admit to the need to snap out of on any given interaction because everything has this system-based mentality baked in if it's a non-organic interaction, of which it seems like fewer interactions are organic than before because more is measured and on the records, I guess, and surveilled or something. So maybe us just being in the digitalized era, maybe we're just crazy and we just need to do a digital detox and everything will be better if we just work on our own skills, survival-based skills or whatever, and prepare for how to grow your own crops and all once everything hits the fan. Or maybe there's like room for improvement within digital spaces that we can make better. And I don't know, either way it's very saturated and it's hard to know if your contribution or whatever is making a difference for the better.
You know what? The thing that we want to do, I think it's very courageous. I'm still down. I mean, but it's catching a falling knife. At the same time, I'm a masochist, so F it. Right? Like, do it. Like,
well, you might as well assume as much accountability, like you're saying. This is the hero's quest, right? You assume as much accountability while journeying out into the unknown as possible and still trying to get away with assuming your accountability for everything and trying to not have a savior complex, but to know that you could be doing the right thing and you don't know if you're doing the right thing yet, but you can try ways of doing it and see if you succeed or fail. And then, well, however much of a contribution people appreciate from that, that just is what it is. And you never really know until you get started, I guess, which is the most difficult step. And then to sustain that. And yeah, I guess it's all just organic and based on approval and what you base your sense of what people's approval is based off of. Like, is it just people approving because you're just parroting what they want to hear parroted so that they can feel they're already correct? Or is it just actually based on them hearing what you're saying and actually trying to improve their own skills in ways that you didn't tell them to because they heard something that tapped into a level of discussion or humility or something that made them realize that that spirit was hidden within them as well, that they always knew was there, but that they weren't willing to actually activate until that moment or something. So it's basically hoping that you make a difference, I guess. Or start inspiring at least somebody.
I mean, okay. I guess, yeah, you know what? I guess I'll say this before I forget, but like, I always forget where I was reading this, but just the writer was saying overall, like language itself is
Hypnosis.
It's noise. It's noise. Yeah, it's literally just noise that we're making. It is a virus. But what it does is it makes you think there's something more complex than what is in your physical world. It's like two squirrels looking at each other. They're not. Maybe they're chit-chattering. They for sure don't have a structured grammatical like vocabulary like the way we do. We over-engineered, overthought the way we communicate with one another. We've completely muddied the waters in terms of what just organic interaction should be. Speech is not required, right? You can actually have a village of people, like a group, like a tribe of people, never make a single peep, and they will get along. They will feed each other. They will, you know what I mean? Like it's perfectly organic interaction. when you introduce speech, you introduce like inconsistencies in intention, right? It's like intention can be seen very obviously with like body language and like, you know, just head movements, facial muscles, right? The moment you start introducing speech, you can show yes and say no, right? And or you can show no and say yes. And that's where the brain starts to get fuzzy. It gets distorted, right? So language, spoken language is distortion, according to that dude. Like you have
Right. Which means the distortion in the signals as you bureaucratize everything gets more and more to where we think written language and everything being digitized and exactly down to the definition of which there are multiple for any word, but we assume that we are getting more precise in our ability to characterize things or agree on anything. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, as you may be implying, we still end up destabilizing everything because there is still room for miscommunication, because there is,
right,
within any communication, the ability to cooperate or defect, right? The ability to
right,
help out or pretend to help out while scamming people at the end of it and
right,
backstabbing them in some way or another. And that's why it is very difficult, because of the ability for some people to play and act and all, to sense the intention behind someone's words, which, as you're implying, are kind of a destabilizing influence if we don't know, once we have enough words out there and digitalized and everything, if any of the signals are actually helping us. And at some point, we know for sure, just like with the whole fiat currency thing, that money is this weird kind of approximation that represents everything, even though it's within everything. So it's like an impossible task, right? It represents what we have, even though it is also something that we have, right? It doesn't make any sense. And in the same terms, like you're saying, unspoken body language based cooperation is entirely possible, and pointing out words in order to represent things that we're already doing seems redundant at some point if we all believe we're on the same page. So we only really need all this level of discussion if we know and we're admitting that we are not on the same page.
right. That's all we're really doing. So, and then at the same time, we're telling ourselves, we're like patting ourselves on the back, saying, "Hey, look, us humans were so intelligent. We invented like structural inputs." Like I would argue that is anti-intelligent. I mean, that's against efficiency, against intelligence. Other animals are more efficient because they don't have this language thing acting as a barrier between like their good intentions and like showing them, like actually showing them, right? Actually presenting them to the other party. Whereas now it's like you could have good intentions and say something wrong, and then the other party might, based on their interpretation of the language, completely misinterpret your good intentions, right? And so what could have originally been a very organically like positive interaction just becomes completely like distorted. And I would say that is not intelligent. you know? So,
Which leads to all kind of counterproductive behaviors and self-destructive behaviors that any animal would look at and be like, that thing is insane. It's like
yeah,
killing
yeah,
itself, and it's like not doing anything to change that situation. And
right.
it's like
It's
shutting
yeah,
itself off from its own possibilities because it's destabilizing its civilization or its community with this whole paralysis by analysis perspective of
oh,
getting into the
right.
details too much, which we want to look at the details for what they're worth, for however many things we want to quantify to call the essentials of our survival based off of. But we can always dive too deep. We can make things a little too customized, and we can get too frozen up on how to exactly phrase something in a way that is totally by the book, consistent with already agreed upon, frozen into place, set in stone definitions that will make everything move seamlessly, even though that's an impossible goal when kind of at the forefront, like we keep on saying, words end up being some form of hypnosis to get some kind of compliance that we don't know is organic or inorganic, because who decided the definitions of words or their intentions in totality? Nobody did. They're all just organically coming out of like patterns of sounds we could make relative to situations that we found were similar. And no situation is totally similar in all ways to any other. So then I guess language, there's a propensity for language to get more complicated over time and for new words to develop as a result of new situations. And at some point, it's like overabundance of the number of ways to describe something, and we have to go back to basics or something. So that ties into the whole bureaucratic notion, and unfortunately, public education and the system that we all assume is going to benefit us if we invest in it for long enough, because we want to get in as one of the college-educated people so we can get in on being one of the elites. But anyway, interesting discussion for sure. Interesting discussion on the notion of society and history, and this philosophical discussion on economics, some technical aspects of technology, and the whole stats, GDP being a hoax kind of, which is the title
widespread
of this podcast. And thank you for listening to this podcast, StatGDP. And this has been Fool Me Twice alongside Where's My Couch. Have a good rest of the whatever it is for you, and a good day, good night.